First IndyCar.
And then I think it was, I don't think we had a PC8, did we?
You skipped some. There were. It was like PC 9B or.
I think we had 9B and everything, and then in PC 10. I think the 8 was another.
Okay, so Luke, it's the dark blue car, right? The number 1 gold charge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that'd probably be a PC 9.
So what do
or
you mean,
9B.
Luke? A 1 minute standalone. All that he needs to say is what This was my 1980. I drove this car. It was a beautiful car. It was memorable because of ground effects, something like that.
Anything, something about like the cockpit. I think kids will think that's cool to get in there. I know it's stripped out.
Okay, no, we'll just do it now since we're talking about it. So,
I mean, that car was terrible here that year. I was not happy with that car. That's why I cut the side out of it.
Yeah. So are we good on speed with the cameras?
Yes.
Okay. 1980, your first true ground effects car, in a nice little 1 minute thing. It wasn't your favorite car, but it was a memorable car for you. What do you remember?
Yeah, it was a gorgeous car. I mean, it was a really good looking car. I mean, the guys did tremendous job on it. I struggled with it handling wise, a bit. I had to work at that one a little more. I mean, we had some good races with it. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those. I struggled more in traffic. Full ground effects car. I don't know how much of it was the ground effects or just something in my field that I struggled a bit more with it. But we had good days and not as good a days with it. But it was a gorgeous race car, and the guys did a great job on it. We had some decent results, but not as good a results as I'd like to have. But
and back then, the interior was a little different. You used to literally have leather seats. There was a dashboard. There was a steering wheel with no gauges. I think you probably had a radio gauge, but it had a dashboard. So if people are sitting in the car, leather seat.
Yeah, it was, sitting in a car, we just did a kind of sculpted a little bit of a seat, and we didn't have much in the way of padding and just kind of leather cover, but it was all kind of form-fitted. Leather seating, dashboard. We didn't have a lot of electronics back then, just kind of a dash. You had our buttons on the wheel for talking or whatever, and our adjustments for the suspension and that kind of thing, and some analog gauges here and there, that, whatever, but maybe a light, but that was about it. But it was a very, for its time, it was a very space age looking cockpit to sit in too, and the windscreen and the aerodynamics and the mirrors and everything. It just, it was a beautiful car.
And then the final thing, throw out some line, you're a foot and a half off the ground. Can you imagine, it was so special going into turn 1, low to the ground.
Yeah. No, I mean, those cars and the way they're built, I mean, you're actually, when the cars are at speed, your rear end's not, but about a half inch off the ground, thickness of the material, the aluminum, but, or carbon fiber now. But now, can you imagine taking a car like that, and sitting in it, sitting that low, and you've got the windscreen, and you're just kind of, your eyesight line is just barely over the top of it. You even got to raise a little bit to see the apex of the corners and all that. And the way the steering wheels were made and all that, it's just more like flying an airplane on the ground, But being in that and entering turn 1 at 200 miles an hour or better, and knowing you've got to hit your marks, 200 miles an hour is a football field per second, and you're trying to hit your marks with a foot or two the same every time you reach your marks. So you can imagine what that feels like sitting in something like that.
That work, Luke?
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Pit fire.
How
wide?
I didn't like that either.
Huh?
I didn't like that either.
No, I know. Well, no, it's put a different face on the trophy for you.
Yeah. Well, that might be worth it. Yeah, that might be worth it.
How did, instead of talking, like I said, about Uncle Bobby and Mario, 81 for you was the pit fire, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah, it was, and again, there was a year that, we didn't qualify well, even though the car was fast enough. But we had a coil problem or something in qualifying and a misfire. And so we ended up having to qualify the second day and weren't eligible. But I think the speed was quick enough for the front row that we ended up running with it. And the race car was good. I mean, we were just, again, it was early in the race and biding our time and seeing what the track conditions were. And thinking about, and talking to the team what kind of changes we were going to need to be making at the first stop and all of that, just doing our regular deal. And when we came into the first stop, the first pit stop, matter of fact, I think we'd just taken the lead. Now, probably some of the cars in front of us had pitted, but also it's because we'd worked our way forward already at that point. So the car was very good. I was very pleased with it. And we came in for the first stop, and I remember just pulling in and rolling to a stop and just thinking, routine stop, get this first one under our belt and go, and no real rush. And I'm sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden I see this big splash of fuel come over the top of me and into the cockpit and hit the dash and down the windscreen and everything. And I go, uh-oh, I'm thinking, we're in trouble. And about the time I thought that, there was a big sheet of it just ran over my helmet, down my face shield and into my lap. And, saturated me. And that was about the time I was thinking we're in trouble. And so about the time before I get that thought through that we're in trouble, it ignited. And now I've got both hands on the wheel and it ignites. And so my first thought is get to my seat belt. So it seemed like everything was slow motion. It seemed like it took my hand forever to come away from the steering wheel down to get to the seat belt. And I remember I went to take a breath and I felt flames start down my throat because it saturated me from the knees up. And the suit is kind of like the wick of a lighter. A new wick, it stays white for a long time because it's the fluid burning, not the wick, the fuel. And so my suit was like a wick. It was saturated and it was the fuel burning in the suit. But I remember I went to take a breath as I'm going to my belt, and I felt heat start down my throat. And because the flames were coming up off my chest inside the helmet, and it was starting to burn my eyes. So I quit breathing, fortunately, but I didn't have a breath because I was struggling to get out, and I didn't have a breath. But I quit breathing, and I kind of kept trying to keep my eyes closed so it wouldn't burn my eyes, and I got unbuckled and got the wheel loose. I don't remember now what all the scenario was, but ended up working my way out. Got out of the car. I remember I jumped down the side, stood down at the side of the car, and like a dummy, if I'd have remembered what they taught me in grade school, lay down and roll. Except we had a lot of fuel on the ground around the car too, but it would have helped because that was standing upright was what was helping the flames go up the helmet. But anyway, so I'm trying to block them with my hands. I got gloves on, so I'm trying to block the flames from coming under my helmet with my hands. And I open my eyes and turn around, and I see somebody running toward me. So I closed my eyes again and waited, and I felt their hands at my helmet, trying to get the suit undone or the strap. So I kept my eyes closed, and I'm still not breathing. I still don't have a breath. And so I wait, and all of a sudden the hands go away. So I opened my eyes, and they took off running. I'd caught them on fire. Nobody knew I was on fire because the methanol burns clear. And they thought they saw the car was on fire, but thought I'd gotten out of it. So now I'm thinking I'm on fire, guy. I look over and I see one of the fire marshals in the pit lane spraying the car, putting the fire out, and I see the fire extinguisher going. So I take off. I beeline across the front of the car and around beside the car and head over for the fire extinguisher. And evidently, I kind of relit the fuel on the ground as I ran through it. But I remember I closed my eyes again and grabbed the nozzle and stuck it under my helmet, and it quit. So I opened my eyes, and he's running. I caught him on fire. So I'm still not breathing. And all of this was only 30-some seconds before I got a breath, but it seemed like 30 minutes. So anyway, I'm sitting there holding this fire extinguisher and nothing's happening with it. And I start looking around, and I see my dad running around. And he comes running around the corner. He was the only one that really knew I was on fire because he knows me and he knows I don't move that fast for anything. So I had to be on fire. But So he reaches down and grabs the extinguisher and stands back away from me because he didn't have any fire gear on either. But he stood back away from me and got the thing spraying again and ended up putting me out. But that was a long 34 seconds with no breathing.
I mean, the crew guys' shirts were on fire. I mean,
Oh, it
wasn't
was,
just
it was,
you. I mean,
yeah,
it
no,
a
it was
pit fire. Yeah.
the whole thing, it was a big deal. And it eventually helped create new rules down the road. It was one of them that helped start the new rules against fire. But no, I mean, when that nozzle stuck open, and the only thing we can think happened is there's a seal, a lead seal that you use to seal after you go through tech, to seal the fuel cell and make sure it's never been open to change, the volume of it. And so there's no cheating going on. But that when we got through with everything, that lead seal was gone. Now it could have just burned off and melted, but there was no sign of it. And the only thing we could think, because he just did the normal plug-in, everything went by the book, and he plugged the nozzle into the tank, and when he did, it jammed and it wouldn't go all the way in. So he pulled it back to reset it, to restart it and go back in again. And when he came out, something held the nozzle open, and that's why the fuel sprayed all over everything. So we're thinking that, they always tape that lead seal down and everything, cover it up. They're thinking it may have come loose and got over in front of the opening. And when he shoved it in, that's what jammed it to begin with. And then as that was trying to close coming out, it locked onto that lead seal and pulled it off. And it's what was holding it open to begin with. So that's the only thing we figured. But I mean, it caught him on fire because it covered everybody. And
did you go to Methodist for that, or was it just infield, or I don't even remember? I mean, how long does it? So I guess how long does it take to recover from third-degree nose burns? I guess.
Well, I had to have surgery, obviously. But I mean, I don't remember now if I went to Methodist first. Probably did, because I know when I pulled my helmet off, and my body was hot from the flame. Obviously, it was hot. But the suit had protected me. It hadn't physically burned me, but the flames where my nose wasn't covered, it did burn, and above my eyes and everything. But I remember my nose was feeling really strange, and I took my hand and kind of wiped my nose. When I looked down my glove, part of my nose was in my glove, and I'm thinking, this is not right. So, I can't remember now if we went to Methodist here first and got checked out, but I ended up going back to California, and there was a surgeon in L.A., skin surgeon in L.A. that dealt with that kind of thing, and got connected with him somehow and went and had some surgery done, first stage. And they had to basically rebuild it. They had to take cartilage out of my ears and, replace, to rebuild the bottom part of my nose. And in the second surgery, that was in the second surgery. The first one was just kind of get everything, some skin grafts, some light skin grafts, and get it working and get everything going again. Which it came out okay, but it wasn't finished. And they just said, he said, we need to let this go for a little bit and heal well. And he said, when your season and your schedule allows, come back in and we'll redo the rest of it. And which the final part, we had to do some fact checking. The final part I did here at Methodist, the final surgery. Same time I was in there for my feet. So, basically had the surgery, and I think I missed one event. Boy,
yeah, I don't remember. Milwaukee the next week, or?
Yeah, I think I missed that one. I came back at Atlanta. Okay. Because I remember when I was laid up, healing up, I started seeing clips in the paper as somebody said there was some rumors going around I was retiring, and this kind of stuff.
We haven't even got to retirement.
So I thought, so I remember when I went back to Atlanta, my first race after the fire, and we won both of them, the 125s.
Twins.
Said, how's that for retirement, guys? But that was my own ego.
Exactly.
But no, it was, we had several people in the hospital. Yeah, we were all Methodist first because that's where we all gathered. After that all happened.
Crew guys, because they didn't even have to wear fire suits back then.
Yeah.
I think, or
Yeah.
not all of them. And yeah, pictures in
Yeah.
Sports Illustrated. And, yeah.
Oh, the fire marshals and everybody, but
Oh, it's
sitting
very
up
much
on
a
the
fire
stand and
marshal.
all that, and sitting up on the stand, you didn't have to have any of it back then.
Right.
None of
So
it.
if we
did.
fast forward a year, it's not as bad as getting burned, but it's a hell of a battle with Gordon Johncock in '82. Take us basically the short, long version of the day, but your final pit stop. Herm Johnson,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yes,
What,
Herm Johnson.
Picking up from no pit speed limit, so it used to be,
Yeah, that was a fun pit lane. It was exciting. No speed limit in the pit lane, so you could be as brave as you wanted to be. And but now we had a good car that day. The car was working well. I felt like we had a good shot at it, and we were kind of doing the standard procedure. And Gordy and I had raced against each other. We'd been around each other throughout the day several times. And there were a couple times I had to pass him, and I could always set him up and get a run and get by. He was running well. I had to earn it, but I could get by him. And so everything was looking pretty good. It's a matter of everything falling right at the end, the last stops and all that kind of thing. So we were getting ready to come in for the last stop. I think Gordy had already made his last stop. Did he make it
you guys
before?
pitted first. You guys had the
We
long-
did. We pitted
the longer
first.
pit stop first, yes.
But so I came in, and just as I come off of 4 and came into pit lane, I caught another car. Herm Johnson, I believe it was, caught him coming into pit lane, and so it wasn't wide open to whatever pace I wanted. I had to kind of key off of him. So I got up behind him to run as quickly as we could, waiting for him to make the swing over to his pit so I could go on. And, we're still clipping along pretty good at that point. But he decides when he gets to his pit, I don't know if it snuck up on him a little bit, but he ended up getting on the brakes in the fast lane before he turned over into the slow lane, which surprised me. And so now I'm all over the brake pedal, and I, slide under him, and luckily I caught his rear tire with the nose. And it lifted up, and it didn't break the wing off. But that added probably 4 or 5 seconds to our pit stop, and because then it was basically come to a halt, and then had to get going again and get kind of back up to speed to get to our pit. So then we made the stop, and we took on pretty much a full load of fuel, which I didn't think anything about it at the time, being a problem, because I knew the car was good, and so we went back out. Well, then Gordy makes his stop, and they just put enough fuel in to get in, and now all of a sudden we're 11 seconds behind, and 11, 12 laps to go, whatever it is. And it's like all we can do is go, head down and just do the best job we can do, get everything out of the car we can, which is basically what we did. And the car was good, and just started leaning on that thing, and just whether it had change pattern, bars, whatever, I had to get the most I could out of it. And I'm thinking, okay, we're just here to see how much time we can make up. I didn't think we were going to be able to catch him. And I just wanted to. My next position was how little I could make that gap before the checkered. Mm-hmm. That was my next challenge. And so we just put our head down and went. And so I'm starting to look at the clock, at the signboard, and the time's coming down, and I'm starting to, wait a minute, that and laps are coming together. It's adding up. And finally there at one point, I thought, we're going to have a shot at this, if we can keep our leg in it. And so I just kept going and kept going and kept going, and it kept getting closer and closer and better. And finally, we ended up catching him, And so when I caught Gordy, it was, I think, I caught him and able to get a run at him on the white flag lap. Mm-hmm. And so when that happened, and I could see the timing working out to where I could get a run at him off of 4 through 3 and 4, I thought, why wait? You know, there's no reason to wait. Because, you know, I've passed him before, and I had the kind of run that I could get him again. So I went ahead and made the run, pulled out, set him up, started up beside him, and I think by the start-finish line, I may have even had him a little, one way or the other, close. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, okay, here he goes, right? And he gets right about here and beside me and then starts picking back up momentum and starts pulling back away from me. And I thought, how did that happen? You know, I haven't seen that all day. Mm-hmm. I hadn't put the 2 and 2 together about the fuel because I didn't know at that time. I didn't even think about it where they came up with that time, extra time. But I was too focused on trying to go. And when that happened, and as we get down toward 1, he's got me by half a car better. It's his corner. I know it, and he knows it. He knows I know it, and it's Indy, and it's the last lap. You think he's not going to go down? You know, it's not rocket science to know he's going to the grass. First of all, he had to push in the car, and he had to, because that's what allowed me to actually start catching him, too. I could tell he had quite a bit of understeer, and he was having to run down in the grass to get the thing to turn, you know. So when we get down to that corner and we're flat, I know he's got to go to the grass to make the corner. And if I'm in his way, we're both going to the fence. So, okay, I had 2 choices. I could stay there, crash, pull my nose out, and have 3 more corners to try to get him set up again. Well, again, that's not hard to figure out. So I chose to take my nose out, let him come across. It took the air off the car. It kind of put me up high, and I had to kind of feather it a little bit to keep it out of the marbles. And so I lost more ground than I wanted to there. But then finally started trying to reel him back in. And had I not lost quite as much there up in the gray, we'd have been a little closer at the start-finish. But it just wasn't enough. We ran out of time. But it was a lot of fun. And Gordy just ran his tail off. He did a great job, you know. And I mean, if we couldn't win it, you know, myself or one of our guys, I was tickled to death Gordy got it.
But the fun factor, I guess,
yeah.
If that's the word I'm allowed to use, that was racing.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, I hated it because we ran second. Sure, you know, we weren't here to run second. But I'm still a believer in enjoying myself, you know, with what I'm doing. That's why I do it. And to me, you know, I was happy with what I felt like I had done. And that's all I can do. Mm-hmm. I felt like I didn't leave much on the table, you know, that last 11 laps trying to reel him in. And I felt everybody in the arena there knew who was the fastest out there, you know, who had the best car, and we did. And we finished second. If you had to run second, it was a fun second, you know. And obviously, I'd rather have won it, but I'm not gonna stomp around and throw my helmet and act like a spoiled child just because I didn't get to win the race that I felt like I should have won. But I was tickled for Gordy, and I had a good time getting to where we did.
Perfect. 2 years later, you do win your second race. You sit on the outside of the front row. A lot of attrition, a lot of cars dropping out. But you end up winning by 2+ laps over, I think it was Roberto Guerrero. What are your memories of '84 and winning in the Penske car in '84?
You know, not a lot of detail. They all start running together after time, and I don't have a lot of detail other than I know we struggled early on, and you know, I think we went down a lap or almost 2.
I think you were down 1, yeah. Yeah,
I went down at least 1 lap. But again, it was the team effort. You know, we got out there, and you never know until a given day, you know, what the conditions are going to be like for the car. And even if it's perfect carb day, doesn't mean it's going to be on race day. And so we struggled and got loose a little bit in the early stages, and it was a handful to hang on to, and I backed the pace down enough to make sure I had to get to the next stops to make the changes needed, and that we didn't stub our toe and not get to do that. So we just ran our pace that we could run and got to the next stops, and the guys started making the changes on the car that we needed to make it better and catch up with where the track was and the competition, and eventually it started turning back around. You know, I think we had some help from yellows to get our lap back, and I think that's when we were I was having a shootout. It looked like we were going to have a shootout with Sneva.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, the same game plan: start the race, get to the second half, get to the position we need to be if we aren't there already, to win the race, to be ready for the shootout at the end. Which is the way I approached all of them. And so I was watching Sneva, and I could tell he was running well, and it looked like he was going to be the guy we were going to have the fight with at the end. So I was just kind of gearing up for that and keeping him in sight and closing in if we weren't there already. I don't remember how close we were at the time with him. But then he ended up having a CV joint. And by that time, we'd already had a lap on the field. You know, he and I already had the lap on the field or whatever, and it was going to be between us. And so the shootout was getting ready to materialize, which is the way you like to win them. And then he had problems and fell out with a CV joint, I think it was. So then it was a matter of we just got to, make sure we don't stub our toe here, and bring it home. And that's when you start hearing things in the car and feeling things that aren't there, and especially when you've got that kind of lead. If you don't have a lead and you're fighting somebody, you're busy,
right.
And when you've got that kind of lead, and do I slow down? That might get a harmonics going that the engine doesn't like, or the gearbox doesn't like, or something doesn't like it. Get it in a range that could cause a problem rather than we've been good with what we're doing so far, Mm-hmm. So you try to hold fairly true to that, but not qualifying laps, and to keep your focus and everything so you don't make a mistake. But then when you do have the time to hear things and feel things, I remember I think it was that when we were coming around to take the checkered flag, and I caught somebody that was a lap down, maybe even the lap before on the white flag lap, and I made up my mind, you know what, I'm not even going to pass them. Mm-hmm. And I think I backpedaled and followed them to the checkered flag because I thought, no fault of theirs. Mm-hmm. They could, about the time I go by, a tire could blow, mm-hmm. A suspension failure, whatever, anything could happen, and you're too close at that point to the Super Bowl to why take any chance if you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And so I followed him around to the checkered flag.
So win number two.
Win number two.
Later that summer, unfortunately, almost all the wins came to the stop, if you will. San Air, practice session, a career changer for you, a life changer to this day. What happened there? And God, that was a horrendous Armco barrier at its worst wreck.
Yeah, it was just, I made a mistake is what happened. I screwed up. Nothing else caused it. But, but I've got my reasons for screwing up. At the end of the day, I screwed up. End of story. But kind of what led me to it was San Air was a new track, a little bull ring, 3-corner, hard to pass, hard to get a clean lap. And I've always kind of liked to get a clear lap on the clock to reconfirm what I'm feeling, where I'm at. And we had been fortunate enough to test there, and a lot of the other teams hadn't. And I think we'd just taken over the lead in the championship. and from Mario, or we'd gotten right to within a point or two.
I think you got it. Yeah.
This is '84. We'd
We'd
won Indy,
1,000 points. That
right?
was the old point system.
And we'd either just taken the lead or we'd gotten right up to Mario. So we were in the hunt for the points, and by having tested there and being an oval, which is, I had my druthers, seemed to be more competitive there. It was an opportunity for points for the championship. It was a good opportunity. So when we started practice there and started running, like I said, it was hard to get a clean lap. And I was always trying to get a clean lap. And, if you've had a test there and you've got an advantage, you go into the hour of practice with that advantage. So at the end of that hour, you want to still have the advantage. You got to keep moving it forward. So you try to hang on to that advantage. So I was leaning on things pretty hard, trying to get a clean lap. And I came off a corner behind a couple of cars, and I could see that I had a good run at them. And if I got by, I could see the next lap I'd be able to make a clear lap. So I got in a rush and started by the car. And when I did, just as I pulled out from behind him, we were catching a car going slow, warming up along the infield wall, guardrail. And it was all happening very quick. I mean, it's a little short straightaway, so it all just started coming together fast. And so I had to run. I had a good run, and it looked like timing was going to work out where we cleared them in time for me to shoot the gap, so to speak. And so I'm trying to stay, I think it was Ray Hall, I was trying to stay right on his left rear with my right front as I was going by as close to him as I could to get as much room on the side as I could. And watch him as the gap was opening up. And so I'm trying to stay as tight as I can, and just as he kind of goes out of sight here, it's just like when you pass somebody on a freeway. You don't necessarily look at them go by. You judge the speed that they went by, and you got to feel when you're clear. So when he went by, I felt like, okay, we're gonna be clear. And I thought we had made it, and about that time I felt the hit, and it turned sideways. I'm looking at the guardrail. So I found out later that he was warming up and running the throttle up and down like this. And he didn't know we were coming. And just as we came by, he had just picked the throttle back up, so that momentum that we went by reversed. And that helped keep the gap down. But anyway, I screwed up by putting it there. But next thing I see the guardrail coming at me, and I'm going, oh boy, here we go. And so I've got everything locked down, and I see the guardrail coming at me. And next thing I know is I'm laying on a stretcher, and I hear somebody saying, Rick, you know who I am, Rick. And it was Roger. When I kind of came out of it, it was Roger. And Chris standing next to him, and he was leaning over me saying, do you know who I am? And that's kind of when things started coming back to me a little bit. But even from that point on, I just remember bits and pieces of the next week or whatever. I remember little bits and pieces of being in the hospital there in Canada. I remember hanging on the rail of a helicopter like a MASH unit outside the helicopter on the gurney with a sheet over me on one of those type like a MASH unit helicopter from one of the hospitals to another hospital or someplace they had to get me to Roger, to an ambulance to get to Roger's plane when they were trying to get me out of Canada. And then I remember bits and pieces like it all starting, here at the hospital with Trammell.
But this doesn't say Terry Trammell did an amazing job.
Oh, amazing job. I mean,
go in. Both your feet were totally.
Yeah, at the hospital there, they were, they had swelled up. When I looked down, first time I remember looking down, laying in the hospital there, and my feet were just killing me. And they were putting ice bags on them, and I remember yelling at them, get the ice bags off, because the ice was just, the cold ice was, it seemed like it was making the pain much worse. But I remember the first time I looked down, I saw both feet were there. I thought, okay, we'll run again.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked like 2 footballs with 5 little footballs attached. They were swollen so bad, so quickly, and that's why they had the ice on them. And then that's about all I remember that little scene. And then there were just bits and pieces like that. And finally, I didn't hear this, but I remember, I guess, the doctors there told Dr. Olvey and Roger, and Penske, that they were so bad they couldn't do anything with them. They were going to take them both off. And thankfully for Roger and Dr. Olvey standing there, they said, "Nah, time out. We're going to try something else." And I guess that's kind of how it went. But so they got me out of there, and that's when they had to get on the MASH helicopter and everything to try to get me and across to ambulances. And ambulance, I remember it seemed like they had to stop somewhere and wait for another ambulance because they couldn't cross the border. And anyway, all this to get to Roger's airplane, and Roger flew me back here to Indy, and got Terry involved. And Terry at the time, I think, was fairly new to the whole racing thing, but he was a young guy, latest technology, and for that time, and like I said, they were going to take him off, and Terry put them back together, and basically saved both feet, and I guess he was even worried about the right one, after the first day and the surgeries and everything. I've heard stories of him going home and tearing up the kitchen a little bit, upset with himself because he thought he was going to lose the right foot. We were really struggling with the circulation. But as it turned out, it made it. But no, he stepped in and basically erector set outside the legs and putting all the pieces back together and getting all the circulation going again, and just did an unbelievable. You can never thank the man enough, for basically saving both feet.
Then you had the press conference. You're in the wheelchair. It's both legs. And then all the questions start. Are you going to race again? Are you not going to race again? Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, when I saw both feet there, I knew I was going to race again. And the only question in my mind was when, when. And the next question in my mind was, how long is it going to take to knock the rust off and get back to where I was at before it happened? And back then we were getting into the road courses more and more and everything, and I knew, I was really steepening my learning curve on the road courses at that point, because we were doing more of them, and Mario was always fast on road courses, and it looked like he was who we were going to be battling for the season. And I think I'd qualified. I had a good qualifying run at Mid-Ohio. Was that before then? Before St. Pete? Because I think he and I were neck and neck qualifying there. So I was catching up with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was my benchmark on road courses. So I was learning it, trying to move mine. And I felt like we were making good progress, and then this happened. So I knew it was going to be a setback, and everybody else was going to continue learning. So it wasn't just getting back to where I was. I need to get back to where I was and then continue on. So that was the only question in my mind. Everybody's saying, are you going to drive again, or how can you do it? Or I said, as long as it's because I love what I'm doing, and as long as I've got both feet down there, and if I get them to where I can move a little bit, we can make them work. And that's basically what we did. Just kind of got everything going. And the first time I got back in the car was at a test at Phoenix, and Simpson had built me some special shoes to fit over everything, and to give me a little protection. I couldn't walk yet. I was basically in a wheelchair, and I got dressed and got my shoes and everything on, and they just wheeled me out, Chris, God bless her soul, going through all this and keeping me pointed in the right direction. She was the one wheeling me around in a wheelchair all the time. But, they basically rolled me out to the car and picked me up out of the wheelchair and just, set me in the seat of the car and buckled me in. So, that was 5 months, I think 5 or 6 months, between the accident and getting in the car. And I was in the hospital, I think, for 4 months, 4 or 5 of the months. Hadn't been out of the hospital all that long when I got in the car. But, so I get out there and we go out and shake it down and then come back in and they check everything out. And then I go out and start leaning on it. And I'll never forget it. I start getting up to speed, leaning on the car and this is great, And I immediately got it to where I could start feeling what the car was doing so I could tell them what we were needing, right back into the routine. So I make the first run, and I come into the pits and stop, and they said, well, what do you think? How is it? I said, well, we're a little neutral in 1 and 2, and I got, a little push coming off of 4 that we need to work on. And the team just laid down on the ground laughing. I mean, they just all broke up, And I'm thinking, what are they laughing about? And they said, no, we want to know how your feet, we can care less about the car. How are your feet, And it dawned on me, that was the best therapy that I ever could have had. It was the first time in 6 months that I'd gotten my mind off my feet and the pain and everything in the feet. It was the first time that something had totally taken my mind away from it. And it was the greatest thing, I mean, it did more for me than 6 months of any other therapy could have done. And so we went in, got over the laughing and everything and got going again and went out and made some more runs. And for me, it was a matter of, it reconfirmed my thought I will be driving again. It reconfirmed it was just going to be, it wasn't going to take as long as I thought to knock the rust off. Mm-hmm. To get myself back to having the feel that I wanted and the feel that I had. But I knew it was still going to take a while to get back to full speed and have any longevity, physically, and to start climbing back, in that respect. That part was going to take the time. Getting back up to where I felt like I could run a competitive lap was not going to take very long. So that put me a little bit at ease. And Roger and Penske did the typical, just like I was telling you when we started, took the pressure off. He came to me and said, hey, do not worry about how long it's going to take. I mean, a lot of teams, I'd have been sitting on a sidewalk. They didn't know yet if I was even going to walk or if I was even still going to have both feet. And Roger's in there saying, don't worry about anything. Do what the doctors tell you. Don't get in a rush. You may do more damage than good. Your seat's here. It's going to be here as long as it takes. So that's the least of your worries. Just get healthy, I mean, what more could you ask?
Yeah, that's confidence and assurance.
Yeah. And so that allowed me to kind of just do whatever I needed to do and not have to worry about it and stay focused on, getting up to speed and everything. So then it's just a matter of, seat time. I think the test was, for me, a great success. I think I even ended up running as quick as Sullivan. But, so, like I said, that's just the best therapy we could have had.
So that's how I was going to get, the best rehab or therapy was actually being in the race car in time. Time healed your feet.
Yeah,
more than
and from that point on, there was still a long way to go, but that told me there was light at the end of the tunnel. I could see where we were going, and then it was a matter of doing the work, and there was a lot of therapy, a lot of that kind of thing, exercises and everything to do to get back. Even after I started racing again, even after we got to the point that I could race, I was still not there. Yes, I was there as far as, especially on an oval, I could go qualify and run well. But just physically being strong enough to have the endurance that I needed wasn't there yet. That was, I could deal with the pain. I could always, modify my shoes, modify the padding, modify the pedals, modify this, modify that. That was an ongoing process, for quite a while. But the therapy, the exercise, and I had to start working out. I was never a big fan of working out, and I never really had to that much until then because, I did, but not real routine because I always got my exercise, off-road racing, motorcycles, motocross, water skiing, driving, 6, 8, 10 hours in a car at a time in the desert, without getting out. When I got into an IndyCar, 4 hours was a snap. It was like short. So now between age and being laid up, I had to start working out, and I had to get into routine and do the physical effort needed to get back in shape. And I remember it's almost like clockwork. I could tell in the races, as I was getting better, I'd get to a point, I'd get on the radio and say, how many laps are left? And that was a tattletale that I was getting. I was starting to get, fall out of the seat a little bit. I was wanting to know how far it was to the end. But, and the reason of that is because I know when the first race that I ran, I came around for the white flag and checkered, and I realized I hadn't asked.
Yeah, you'd made it. Yeah.
Okay. It hadn't even crossed my mind. I was physically back, in contention of where I needed to be to be back to where I needed to be. So, but that all was a long process. That first year we just ran part-time, 85.
Well, and that was the thing, and super short answer, because there's a ton of pictures of it. In 85, Danny won Indy. It was Danny's first year with Penske. But you were on your scooter anytime you were on, you'd graduated from the wheelchair, if you will. But I think it was a little red scooter that you were on, and there's pictures of you talking Danny on pit road. But you made it after the wreck. Less than a year later, you were back at Indianapolis.
Yeah.
500.
And we probably had one of our worst qualifying runs, for not having a problem, that I'd ever had there. And that was due to rust and due to my confidence. And I went into that month just glad to be there. And I was still knocking the rust off and getting back physically at the time. I felt we could run decent, but I was still leery, and my feet were still really fragile, so I didn't want to make a mistake and do more damage. But, basically in the race, it took a while to get my confidence level back. And that's why I was just taking my time, because I knew that's what it was going to take. This joint especially is all about confidence. And so, we started out kind of ho-hum, which we've done before. And, I think I lost some places early on, didn't qualify well to begin with. And then gradually I started getting comfortable, with where the car was, making some changes, started getting comfortable with traffic, getting my confidence level back, and we started moving back forward. And I think we ended up setting the fastest lap of the race, before we ended up falling out. But once I got back to the confidence level, I really felt like, okay, we're going to be around here. We're going to be in a position to have a shot at it, depending on what else falls, our way. And like I said, I think we had the quickest lap, and then I ended up having a gearbox problem. Linkage, seized up and ended up putting us, stopping us. But it was so I was pleased. I wasn't real pleased with qualifying, but I knew why. I knew, I wasn't there yet to get it totally, and my confidence wasn't there to get totally on the limit. And but then later in the race, with seat time and everything, we got there.
So moving ahead a few years, between Penske really stepping up their game with Nigel Bennett and the PC-17, let's talk about 88, and the first thing, like you said, you qualify. It's an all Penske front row. You're on the pole. I mean, 88 was an amazing, beautiful car.
It was.
And a fantastic year for you, really. Danny Sullivan for 100 and some laps, it was great, but then you took over after he hit in the short shoot. So first of all, talk about the all Penske front row. Something, it hasn't happened since, never's happened before.
Yeah, 88 was fantastic. And first of all, like we're talking about, the car was beautiful, and Bennett, Nigel, he had such a knack for make the function, but still beautiful, still a piece of art with function. He could take everything that was needed to make the thing do what it was supposed to do, and still just put it in lines that that looked great. And in everything, every year it was like fit and finish inside. How do you do better? And you come back next year and he just raised the level again. But 88, and to have all three cars on the front row like that was just incredible. For the team, it shows the depth of the team. It showed, typical, like Rogers always said. He's always argued the point of 1, 2, and 3. If I'm going to have 3 horses in a race, why don't I want all 3 of them as good as they can be? Better my odds. And that just kind of helped show that all 3 of us were right there. And again, the car was great. That was the open wheel test, wasn't it? Or closed wheel.
There's that's what I was going to get to next. Yeah, they're not chrome.
Yeah, the disc.
I think Al yelled, "Nothing's chrome." It was the
flush wheels.
Yeah,
what we call the flush wheels.
For qualifying.
Yeah, that was kind of a new era for them, and the beginning of it. And when we put them on in qualifying, it helped where I was needing it. And so I said, "This is great. Yeah, we'll go with them." And so we qualified with them and everything. And then when the race started, the car went loose right off the bat. I always seemed like I always leaned that way too much. Ended up starting out loose and have to back up. But anyway, it started going loose, and I kept playing with it, moving around on the track and adjusting the tools and everything. And I knew all we had to do is, we could at the next stop we could just turn it to a front wing out of it and bring it, the looseness in the middle where I was struggling, it would fix that. But if we did that, now it was going to make me light on my turn in, and maybe start picking up understeer on the entry and understeer on the exit to cure the push in the middle. And I remembered that when we put the flush wheels on, that's where they helped me the most. They helped me rotate in the middle of the corner, and they didn't really affect the entry and exit that much. Because usually if you got the rotation in the middle, you were loose entry and exit. And so that helped blend those. So the way the track was on that day and the way the car was handling, I could fix the middle, but it was going to hurt my entry and exit. So I thought, okay, I'll get more total gain, which is what this place is always about, getting more total gain. I'll get more total if I can fix the middle without hurting the ends. And the best way to do that is get rid of the flush wheels, because I knew from what I'd felt what it was going to do for me. So I kind of hesitated on that call in for a while, but then finally I said, we got to do it, So I called into the radio and said, this next stop, I said, I need open wheels, because I really think it'll be a better gain for the long haul. It might not be all of it right now, but by the time we get to where we need to be, it will be a big part of it. So, and typical Team Penske, no hesitation. Matter of fact, I was just talking to Breon about this a couple of days ago. And he worked his tail off. He earned every, he was a huge part of that win. But, I had, those guys were running back and forth to Goodyear and changing the tires. And because you got them all mounted, balanced, selected, sized, perfect, And then I call in and say, hey, throw them all away. Let's do something different, And so, but typical team. By the time we made that first stop, they had a set for me. We put them on, and it did exactly what I thought it would do. Helped me where I needed it without hurting me otherwise. And then we could just start tuning for the race from that point on. And that kind of got me in the hunt. And now it's just let's start fine tuning and go where we need to go. But I was watching those guys, and Sullivan was strong. He was running quick. He was very fast. And he would have been tough if it would have come down to the end on that deal. I mean, I it's hard to say. You never know. I mean, but from the laps we were running and the way the car was at the end, it would have been a fight. I can't say for sure which way it'd come out, but it would have been a great fight. But it was a shame that he had the trouble he had, that put him out. But because he was very strong that day, and Al too, it was just a great event in that respect. All three cars running the way they were. Just again, right back to the team effort.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, it's your third win. That was a big year. Chevy was back in. That was the first win for Chevy. They'd won a million years ago, but the first win for Chevy, which was a big deal at the time. So give me a little wrap-up statement. Fantastic third win. It was great to have Chevy back. Because obviously Roger oversaw that entire program.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, that year was a great year in so many different aspects. Chevrolet coming back on board, being their first good solid run in there, and being with us and with Team Penske, and obviously Penske, and they all had all came together on that package to build what we needed. Again, the whole team worked, but to be able to get their win, get the win for Chevrolet back in as early and as quickly as we could for them was just a huge asset for us, and to help our partners that way and them for what they did.
We're going to skip again. 91, memorable year for a zillion reasons. It's the 75th anniversary of the 500. But for the first time ever, it wasn't your fault. You had an incident on Friday, first time you hit the wall at the Speedway, incident on Friday before qualifying with a broken left rear hub, right rear hub. Yeah, that it was an eye-opener. Almost closer. No, it was, that was, we were very fortunate. It was a great, obviously, like I said, it was a great year, but no, it was the first year we'd ever touched the wall here. And again, just like back in some of our earlier statements, I can't thank the team enough for giving me the equipment to not ever have to worry about that kind of thing. Because it's always there. It's always, it can always happen. But that was one of the biggest things about the Team Penske and Roger and this organization. You can never thank them enough to have that kind of confidence that you can go out and lay it on the line like that and know that all you have to worry about is what you do wrong, Can never thank them enough for that. But anyway, but it does happen. And that was one of the times that it happened. It was some problems with some pins on the hub, not seating properly in the wheel or something that caused it to come loose. It was the backup car. I think it was a backup car. I was just shaking down. It was a primary car, but I don't want to interrupt.
No. Okay, yeah, it was the primary car. Yeah, it was the primary car. And we were it's kind of early in practice, and getting going. And I remember I went into turn one, and I turned in, and just as I turned in, the car stepped out on me. And it stepped out, and I caught it, and I thought, oh, that pretty good gust of wind or something just got loose. And just about the time I caught it and was kind of waiting for it to come back, it went into a real hard shudder and vibration, and then immediately I knew it wasn't wind or it wasn't anything else. And then the right rear wheel exploded, and then it just went backwards and went in. So at that point, you're longing for the ride, and we just rode it out, and got back to the garage and took a look at everything, and people always wonder, how can you get back in a car after something like that happens? Well, as long as I know what happened, as long as we figure out what took place or what I did wrong or whatever, then there's no problem getting back in a car. And they immediately diagnosed what took place, So then it's just a matter of getting the backup car and getting out and getting going again, which again showed the teamwork, I hit the wall there for the first time, and we get back, and it had fractured some bones in my right foot, which were, always going to be a little fragile. But we didn't really announce that for obvious reasons. But we get back once I get checked out in the hospital and everything, and we get back to the garage, and Roger says, "What do you think about, getting in the backup car?" And he's leaving it totally up to me, because he knew my foot was hurting, but I wanted to get back in it. I said, "Roger, I want to get in it, but I'm not sure if I can push the throttle down because of my foot." I said, "Let me get in it and try." And I said, if it's close and we can loosen the thing up a little bit where I can actually physically push it down without a knife sticking in me, I definitely want to run the car. So I got in, and they went to work on it, on the injectors and everything, and taking the springs off. And I said, "Nope, needs some more." And they'd work on it some more. "Nope, needs." Basically, we took just about every spring on the throttle off, to where I almost had to pull it back with my toe. But finally got it to where I could move it. So I said, okay. I think, if I remember right, I just stayed in the car, and they just rolled me out in the pit lane and got all buckled in and helmet on, and the backup car, and went out, and I think we may have did the shakedown, made sure everything was okay, and then went out and did a run. And I went out in the first run that I leaned on it. Again, testament to the team, having the backup car that close to what the race car was right out of the box, it would kill me every time I'd move my foot. If I was flat, it was okay. And if I was off, it was okay. But if I had to move my foot, it'd just kill me. So, I kept running, getting up to speed, and I'd roll out and throttle back into it, and it'd kill me. And I'd finally get to the floor, and okay, there was a lot left. So I'd have to do less of that. And I could tell within just a lap or so that I was going to be able to make it flat with this car. So I thought, why these baby steps? I might as well put it down, because it's not going to hurt as much, and get it over with, and I can get out of the car. So I got the thing flat and left it flat for a lap, complete lap, and then got out of it and brought it in, and it ended up being the quickest run we'd run all month. So it was great two or threefold. It was great for my confidence getting back on the horse. It was great for the team's confidence in me getting back on the horse, because you never know with somebody, it could put a little more fear. But, race car drivers aren't real smart, but it's a lot of fear. But I wanted to get back on the horse for that very reason. I wanted to make sure, although I didn't have a problem getting back in the car, because I know what happened. I know what caused it. But I wanted to shake it off just for my own confidence, the team's confidence, sponsors, and everybody else. And then to run the quickest lap we'd run all month. What a thank you team. You guys given me the equipment in the backup car to be able to do that.
And the next day, all the good stuff keeps going. It's pole number 6 for Rick Mears at Indianapolis.
Yeah, I mean, the car was good. The car was just right from that run on, especially. To be able to qualify on the pole again, again, it was just one of those days. The thing was free. It was nice. I held my breath as long as I could. Want to pay the team back for giving me the stuff to do it with, if I can get it done. And it worked. It was there, and they gave me the tools I needed to be able to do it.
So it's the 75th Indy 500. You've crashed. You're on the pole. The people on the front row with you are A.J. Foyt and Mario Andretti. What an iconic front row to lead up to coming down for the green flag for number 75.
Yes, and them being there was part of the inspiration of holding your breath a little longer and qualifying to try to, they're two of my heroes. If there's two I wouldn't want to beat, it would maybe be them, but they're two I want to beat the most too, because of who they are, and they are. So that to be on the front row with them and be on the pole besides, and be lined up next to two of the guys, that I had admired as much as anybody other than my dad and his racing, was just incredible, a phenomenal.
And you said you always wanted to win a shootout, and boy, the final handful of laps with Michael was sure memorable and sure a shootout.
Yeah, it was a shootout, and it was, it just continued on what that car had been doing all month. It had always been good and kind of out of the box, just a matter of tweaking, tuning, and getting the balance that we wanted. But in the race was the same way. It came out of the box strong. I mean, it wasn't balanced right necessarily at the start. I fell back. My typical deal, I ended up going loose, and I get so used to qualifying free, I end up starting the race too free, I think, half the time. But anyway, so I'm backing up and I'm losing some places. But I know it's there. It's a matter of getting to the stops and getting the guys, letting them do their magic to it and the work and adjustments, and we'd be where we needed to be. And in the meantime, it's a matter of, while you're struggling with it, don't over struggle and make a mistake and take yourself out of the picture, and keep your eye on who's doing what and who you're going to start sizing up the competition. And so we were doing that and started making some changes. I think we went the lap down, or almost a lap down. Michael was coming around to put a lap on me, he thought. And I think he still thinks to this day he was going to put a lap on me, but he wasn't going to. I mean, in the early part of that run, and we were getting closer to the end of the run, so you keep all that stuff, keep track of how much you need to do to win. And I was watching the gap of him coming around to me, and I was starting to slowly pick the pace up a little bit. I didn't want to go nuts with it and make a mistake, but I was slowly picking it up so the gap didn't come quite as quick, to buy more time to get to the yellow or get to our next pit. And I could have run hard enough. He wouldn't have been able to pass me if I'd have had to, but I didn't want to have to. And so I was trying to keep it spaced gradually until the stop, and then we got lucky and got a yellow at the last minute, and that ended all of that scenario. But I felt like we had enough. We wouldn't have gone a lap down there. We'd have been able to make it to the next stop. But so then we got in, got the change made, and continued to work on it, and pretty soon the thing came really good, and it came, like I said, I know after the shootout, after the race, at the end of the race, Michael was a little, where'd that come from? That speed, that extra speed. Well, that speed was always there. It showed it in qualifying. You know, that car had always been fast. Matter of getting the balance right for the given time. But so I knew if we got the car back to where it needed to be, it was going to be that fast.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to show it.
Right.
You know, and that's part of the chess game, and that's part of, you know, I was watching him, and he'd led mostly all day. So unless he had trouble, he was going to be the guy we were going to have the shootout with. Mm-hmm. And like we'd said, you know, it never boiled down to a shootout before. But this one kept looking stronger and stronger, like it might. And so if it was going to boil down to that, I'd been watching him. He had a little understeer in his car, which is a little bit more the safer way, which is, I want to run it that way too if I can, you know. Not that he was doing anything wrong. And I would run mine that way too if I had everybody covered, especially. But now if somebody is running faster, now I know I've got to go into that. I've got to get into that range of holding my breath a little longer, a little harder, free the car up, take a little more risk to be competitive. Well, if he thinks he has me covered with that in the car, he's going to keep it. If I show him that I can outrun him, he's going to go to work. Mm-hmm. I don't want him to go to work. I want him to leave it the way it is. So, you know, I just didn't show our hand. We just ran what we needed to stay in touch and back and forth, whatever. And then after the last stop, okay, now it's time to go. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started showing our cards and when he could no longer come in and make a change. And that's when he said, "Where'd that come from?" Well, it didn't come from anywhere. It was always there. It's just it was time to use it.
So talk about the pass and the repass.
The pass.
We don't have to talk about Mario stopping because that's another story. But the pass and repass is what everybody remembers.
Yeah, the pass and repass, the shootout that I finally got to do. Though that's the most gratifying to me, gratifying way to win a race. You know, have a good battle at the end. And that was shaping up to that more and more, and I'd never been able to have it before like that. So, and I felt a car to do it, so I was looking forward to it. So we get together and running 1-2, and we have a yellow, and after the stops or whatever, I don't remember the scenario that put us all in that position, but it's getting down toward the end, and we've got the yellow and the restart. And there's two cars in front of me. I think it was Al Jr. and John Andretti. Mm-hmm. And was it Andretti in front of me, I think, when he's second? Yeah. He was second in line. It was Al and he and then myself and Michael. And they were a lap down, or to go a lap down. And I was leading, and Michael was second. So Michael's always quick on restarts, and I know it. You know, I'm always ready for him on a restart. He's going to be there. So, you know, I tried to set up the timing and everything where I didn't get balked too much on going green for him to get much of a run, and it worked out pretty well. Had a good clean run at those guys in front of me, and had a good toe to pick up. So when you use that toe all the way up to the very last second and jump out to carry the momentum. So I did that, and just as I jumped out on John, he jumped. He had done the same thing to Al and jumped out on him. He didn't do it to block me or anything else. He was just making his pass. But the timing worked out to where just as I jumped, he jumped, and I had to lift to keep from hitting him, mm-hmm. and continue on over. Well, that little hesitation and throttle, and now we're three abreast with a huge hole in there. Here comes Michael like a freight train, you know. So a couple of things there. We get down to the end of the straightaway. I had enough momentum to get by them, and Michael's coming at me hard. Two things are going on down there, a couple of things. First of all, on a restart, you aren't at full speed when you get to one. By not being at full speed, the groove is much wider. So I knew he's going by me no matter where I go. At full speed, when the groove's very narrow, you can just pretty much run the pattern, and it's difficult mm-hmm. to get by. But with a wide groove, wherever I go, I can't go far enough to keep him from going by me. So okay, I'm going to give him the long way around. Add footage to him, so that'll keep me a little closer to him when we get onto the backstretch. So I stayed on the bottom, let him go to the outside, and he's on it. You know, he's going by me. Got the momentum. So he goes by me on the exit one, and he gives me a little chop job and a short shoot, which kind of made me mad. He didn't have to do that. He had me passed. But then on second thought, I thought, okay, I'm glad you did that, because now you're out of line going in to two. You don't have the optimum pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to scrub off a little more speed, take off a little more speed in the middle of two, which will allow me to get to him even sooner. So that takes place. I start picking up the draft, and I really felt we were gonna, we'd get him back. I hated that I had to, because you never know.
Yeah.
I hated that the pass happened, but I felt we were strong enough to get it back at some point. I didn't know how quickly. It was going to take some work, and I thought to get him. I didn't know if I was going to need traffic help or if we were going to be outright fast enough to do it or not. And so we started picking up the draft, going, down the back chute. And I actually started catching him quicker than I thought I was going to. Went through 3 and 4, still, good run. And I mean, I'm still flat. I'd never lifted since I'd had to make the jog, to keep hitting John. From that point on, I've been flat. And so now, and plus his draft all the way around the lap, and now catching him, I'm going to be entering one at a speed I don't know. I've not been there. We actually looked at telemetry, and I hadn't been that fast into one all day with all the drafts. So, but anyway, picked up the draft, got the nice run, and now I'm dead center with him. He's dead center in the straightaway, and I'm waiting as long as I can to see which way he's going to go. Try to get him to commit before I did. And finally, he was kind of thinking about it, and then he ended up settling in the middle, and I just went to the outside. And credit to him, I don't know if it was the timing that I moved from between when he looked in the mirror where I was at and the next time he saw me I was out there, or if he just decided it wasn't the right thing to block me, or if I had a big enough run, it could have been a big problem for both of us if he'd have blocked me. And but he also had the push in the car, which is what I was hoping for, because the tires were cool from the restart, and mine, I knew the front would pick up a slight understeer with laps, with temp, and they were at their best, in the first lap or two, in the middle of one. So I knew he still had the understeer. Mine were cooled off. I was hoping he was going to have to go to the apron down to the grass to get it to turn, which would allow me to come down with him to get more in the low side of the main groove to be able to stay in the throttle so I wouldn't have to pedal it. And, if he had held me up, if he'd have stayed up, he'd have had to lift a lot because of the understeer, which is why he didn't, I think. But it would have probably forced me to have to lift, and it would have been a tighter deal. No telling. But as I start in outside of him, we start down into one. I'm watching his right front and where he's going, and I see him, arcing the thing down toward the grass. I'm going, oh, great. And so I just, as I'm coming up, I just got on him and stayed with him, down to the bottom. And that helped me keep the front end in the car where I could stay on the throttle. And it was still unknown territory. I was thinking I could stay on the throttle and make it out the other side, but I wasn't 100% sure. But by him going down there, it helped my confidence of being able to do that. And so I stayed with it, and sure enough, the tires held with me well enough. I started picking up a slight scrub, but I could tell the arc was going to make it out to the side without having to lift. And so at that point, okay, we got it. We got the momentum and everything. And when we came off of one, after I cleared him coming off of one, I did the little chop job like he did to let him know I wasn't appreciative of it. But I didn't stay there. I went back to the fence because I wanted to get into two. And sure enough, I got back to the fence, got as good a line and no lift through 2, as good as I could get, and it gapped him enough that he couldn't pick my draft up to get back on me by 3. Then it was a matter of just, we got to qualify now, keep your head down, and stay focused, no mistakes, and bring it home, and that's what we did.
And you bring it home and you win number 4 to join a super elite group of, you can use the names, AJ and Big Al. What was it like to win number 4, and what was it like to join that group of heroes, legends, if you will?
To be in that group, I still don't feel like I belong in that group to this day. I just don't. Because they're 2 of my heroes. And I didn't get to run the dirt tracks. I didn't get to run, the combinations of the things that they got to run back then. And I've always missed that. I've always felt like, it would have been a lot of fun to be able to do that. But when I think about the cars they drove, the era, they were in, the fuel tanks that they sat in, they were tough. They were tough. That was a very tough time to accomplish what they accomplished. And so I guess thinking about all of that, it's always made me feel like I'm not really in their class. Although the number matches, 4 wins, but they were always 2 of my heroes, and to be mentioned in the same thought and same breath and same category with both of those guys is just it's a great honor to me.
And you've had Big Al as a teammate.
Yeah.
One second. I just want to make a note.
We have about 20 minutes more, depending on how fast he gets through retirement, which you can give the short version of why.
Oh, why I retired? Yeah, yeah, okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit about 92 and.
I keep running all this. Stuff keeps running. I'm probably dragging all of it out longer than it needs to be.
You're wonderful. But for this last answer about those 2, do me a favor, use their names. Somewhere reference AJ, say instead of them or they.
Okay.
Mention.
I'm sorry. I need to.
No, that's fine. Because then it's an easier standalone answer, and they can run footage.
Right. Yeah.
Or pictures or.
Okay.
We lost some of the natural light that was coming in.
I know we've gone from a thunderstorm to light to.
Yeah, but how's my hair?
It's backlit really.
It's
nice.
terrible.
You got a little.
I got my.
Fill
I got a little halo going.
I got my April-May haircut
April.
a day ago, and he chopped it.
Well, that's why I get it done like 2 months in advance, so I back time it. So yeah, race day or whenever.
And I hadn't had one in a while, so when it's that long, they figure I haven't been there for a while. I must want a lot of.
When I didn't get cut, god damn, that was a long time, a year ago.
Okay, anytime.
We're good?
Yes.
So you joined we're kind of going to repeat ourselves, but you joined the elite group using the names Al Unser and AJ Foyt, 2 of your all-time heroes.
Well, joining the group with Al Unser and AJ Foyt being 2 of my heroes, to be mentioned in that group with them, although I've never felt like I've earned it as well as they did, but it's just a great honor for me to be in there with both of those guys.
So you win in 91. In 92, you're coming back. I think you ran the exact same car, actually. I think. And you're out in practice, and you break water hose or something going into 2. One of the most spectacular accidents anybody's thankfully ever walked away.
And I remember all
And
of
I think
it, which surprised me.
still has the helmet, and he's hiding it from everybody. But
Yeah, I'm going to get that one day.
a year later, you go from hero to almost complete zero because of that wreck. Yeah, what do you said you remember the whole thing? Talk about that wreck.
It takes me about 10 times longer to explain what happened than it took. Now, basically, this was the T car, and I was shaking it down. So I actually, a little bit of a blessing was I wasn't at full speed yet. And I think the telemetry said we were about 215, 216 at the time the car spun, leading right up to that, which normally would be closer to the 20s. But and so I'm getting up to speed. I'm leaning on it pretty good, getting up to speed, and I come across short shoot and turn into 2. And again, it's kind of like the turn 1 is at 91. It stepped out a little bit, and I caught it. And I thought it's just a gust of wind on the nose, pinned it. And it came back, and then when it came back, it stepped out again, and I caught it. And I'm thinking, no, this isn't wind. I come back, and it starts wiggling around, and this is not wind. We got a problem. And it went out again big. And I wound as much as I dared, because you can't put too much, you won't unwind it quick enough. And waited, and it started going on around. I thought, okay, we're done. I just locked it down at that point. So my first thought was, when it started around, I locked it down. My first thought was, oh man, this is going to hurt. That was the first thought. Second thought is, I want to get around quickly, and so it doesn't, so I get to the side first,
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't get to the nose. I'm thinking of my feet. I want to get around quickly and land on the side, or get around slowly until the front goes by and then hit the other side. So when it starts around backwards, I start looking over my shoulder to see where the wall is, to see how that timing's going to come out. And I can't see because tire smoke's starting to come through the car. So I can't see the wall. So I don't know how it's going to hit. So okay, I'm going to give it a quick beat and pull my feet up. So I gave it a quick beat now, and I yanked my feet up, and that's about the time it hit. Well, when it hit, the first thing I felt was different. It was kind of an odd feel. I remember it got my attention for a split second. And then the next thing I felt was my legs and feet slapping each other. And that's where all the pain came. That's when the pain really started, when they slapped each other. And that got my mind off of that first thing I felt. And now those things are killing me, and I'm thinking, because I'm not sure how I hit either, how bad are they hurt? But no sooner than that happened, and I thought that, all of a sudden I felt something else, a jolt, and something got my attention. I looked up, and there were sparks flying. Damn, I'm upside down. That was the odd feel I felt. It was rolling up over the rear against the wall, starting to roll. And then I went to my legs. But anyway, so it lands on its lid, lands on the roll bar, and I'm sliding down the straightaway in just a slow spiral on the roll bar. First thought is, how bad are my feet? And then a second, I'm looking around to see if I can get an idea how I'm angled. Am I going in to hit the wall, inner wall, or going to go out and hit the outer wall again? And listening for other cars, see if everybody's slowed down or not. Then all of a sudden I see water, or I didn't know it was water, fuel or fluid running in. So now the panic is it going to ignite? Because I've been through the fire. I don't like the fire. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a breath, so I was going to make sure I had a breath on this one. So when I saw that, I thought, okay, I started breathing real shallow, got a deep breath and then just started breathing real shallow so I would be ready if it ignited, because I can't unbuckle, I can't do anything until it comes to a stop. And there's no rubber on the ground, so it's not stopping very quick. It's a long slide. Mm-hmm. So I see infield, outfield going by. And I'm holding my breath, waiting for it to ignite. And finally it comes to a halt, and it's like, okay, it can't be fuel. It would have lit off by now. So now I can relax a little bit. And so it's not going to ignite. I'll just sit here and hang here and wait. And so I'm watching cars go by, just see the bottom of them going by slow. Fortunately, they're going by slow. And then pretty soon here comes one of the trucks, the corner truck's coming up, and I can see the bottom of the tires pull up to the truck, to the car. And I hear somebody saying, "Mears, you all right? You okay?" Yeah, I'm fine. Get me out of here. Quick. So, we started doing everything we need to do to get out of the car. But no, it was a hard hit. It really amazed me, that hard a hit, that, because I got a bit of a glass jaw. I've had my bell rung off-road racing and different things, and I might realize everything's going on now, but 30 minutes later I might get a little bit of a blank spot started, and that didn't even happen, with this. So it really, I guess, just helmet and padding and everything these days, or those days, were much better.
Yeah. So that was the first hit of the month, and then race day, super cold in 92. Everybody was having problems on restarts or getting tires up to temperature, and you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, basically.
Yeah, race day, I go, well, what ended up being my whole career, basically. Never touching anything until 91, and then ended up touching twice in 92. But the race itself, cold tires, restarts. A lot of people were having trouble on restarts and losing it, and so we were just kind of doing our thing. Car wasn't really quite as good as I wanted it, but we still had time to work on it. Excuse me. So we were just doing our thing, getting things going. And one of the restarts, I think it was Jim Crawford. And one of the restarts, we took off. We got a restart, got going, and I came up behind Crawford to pass him, and I had a good run at him. Picked up throttle, had a good run. So I was going to just try to get on by him. And just about the time I got to him, the cold tires caught him, and he turned sideways in front of me. And we just started using carbon disc brakes, and they don't work when they're cold. We made them much better today, but those were the first attempts, and they didn't work at all until you got temp in them. And being a cold day, coming off of yellow, you hadn't been using them, and so when he turned sideways, I'm standing up in the seat on the brake pedal, and they didn't start working until about the time I hit him. I felt them just starting to come in about the time I hit him. And so here we go again, and I think the only thing I hadn't stretched in the first crash was my neck, and I think I got my neck in that one. But yeah, it was a shame. It was a tough day. A shame for him, shame for all of us, but it was a tough day.
Little did the fans know that would be Rick Mears' last Indy 500.
Yeah.
You kind of had thoughts going in. You had kind of planned or thought of retirement before that.
Yeah, I had been. And I didn't know yet at that time either that it was going to be my last one. It's, where's the next race? Where's the next car? Whatever. But I had been kicking it around. I had just started in the previous year or two before that. It had, not thinking of retirement, but kind of sneaking up on it, thinking about when am I going to start thinking about retirement. But and what brought it to my attention was I noticed one time the focus level had dropped. And to me, that focus and that desire is what creates the result, and along with the team and everything else. From my end of it, the job that I do, it's the desire that creates the result, the way I've always felt. So I noticed, I can't remember what year it was, but because I've always enjoyed being in the garage, working with a team, sorting that's one of the interesting parts for me. Make the car work better so I don't have to work so hard. So I always took it home with me. And I don't remember when it was, but I came back into the garage here at Indy. And I remember walking in the garage and said, okay, guys, where are we at? What are we doing? And it dawned on me. I usually came back in the door saying, okay, last night I was thinking about we need to try looking at this, or this. Mm-hmm. And I just walked in and said, where are we at? What are we doing? And that's when first time I realized that, that desire was starting to taper off. So that's when I first started kicking around, how long is it going to be now, you know? And I kept tabs on that desired level, you know, and it didn't affect me in my job. It affected me on my driving. I mean, I'd notice little things like maybe get a little closer to something than maybe I would have normally. Not close like damaging close, but closer than what I would normally want, you know. So, and that was just what I felt was desire. So I'd been kicking it around. Now, I'd had a lot of people after the accidents and after my retirement saying that they thought the accident, you know, was the reason for the retirement, the accidents. And I can honestly say no, you know, that wasn't the reason. Now, I can also I've got to honestly say, now, did it speed up the process? Probably. You know, it may have moved it forward a little bit, but it wouldn't have been by a lot because I was already getting pretty close. And when I did retire, when I got out of the car at Michigan, you know, getting out of the car there was one of the final straws that made the decision for me. I would have never gotten out of a car that was still running, no matter how bad it was, if the desire would have been there. So that I just kept adding those things up that kept showing me it was time to go, and that just so happened that's how it worked out. But now I've got to honestly say, yeah, it may have sped up the process a little bit.
But you were a pretty beat up warrior. I mean, between your wrist, your feet.
Oh yeah, but it's still, you know, that I couldn't have not done it. You know, it wouldn't have been that I couldn't have done it. Still, it was a matter. I mean, after I got out of the car for my last race, yeah, I had to have surgery again to take. That's the reason I was going to miss the next race. Is the reason I decided to retire. But that's not to say I couldn't come back and kept going. And at that time, but what kept me from doing that was not having the desire to dig down. I was going to have to go to another level. I couldn't stay competitive where I was at, because this business I've been gaining levels all my life. It never ends. You know, if it ends, you shouldn't be out there. That's the way I always looked at it. And you know, young kids coming in, Tracy coming in, and just going about things in a different way, working harder at it. I was going to have to recommit and go to another level. And that's where the desire, not having it, was not going to allow me to do that. I just didn't have the desire to recommit. And so finally putting all that together, that's when I said, and that's basically what I told Roger. I said, I just don't, to continue on doing this, I'm going to have to refocus, recommit, and go again, you know, to another level. And I said, I just don't have the desire to do it. Not strong enough desire.
And you announced it I think you told Roger ahead of time, but then you told the team that year at the Christmas party, I'm, you know, retiring. Everybody was shocked. That was before the internet. That was before
Merry Christmas, Paul
Twitter.
Tracy.
Yeah.
No, that was it. And, you know, I didn't. Also, one of the reasons, you know, nobody knew much about it, because I didn't want anybody to. I didn't want anybody else interference, any other interference, influence my decision. Chris knew. You know, my wife knew and my brother knew. I mentioned it to my brother, and they were the only two. And because I knew it was a decision I had to make, and I had to be comfortable with it. You know, I can be talked into things, and we all can. You know, and no, you're fine. You can go another 10, 20, or you should have gotten out yesterday. You know, who knows? But so it was something I had to keep going through and adding things up that made sense to me to make the decision. And so that's why nobody else knew. Like I said, talked to my brother, talked to my wife, and then finally I went to Roger with it after I'd pretty well made the decision. Obviously, I decided this is what I got to do before I went to Roger. But it was all the right time, right place. And when I talked to Roger about it and I mentioned it to him, I wasn't ready to get away from this team was like family, and I still loved the sport. I wasn't ready to get away from that. I was just ready to get out of the seat. So, but I didn't know how it would go once I got out of the seat, if I'd still be able to be involved or not. But that couldn't affect the decision. Mm-hmm. In my mind. I either had to want to do it or not. And so finally said, go, and I told Roger, well, typical him, he said, just like when I tested the Formula One car, he said, well, that's a decision you got to make. He said, I'm not going to say you can't do it. Mm-hmm. That's just something you got to do. You got to make the call. Same thing, he says, well, that's a decision you're going to have to make, It'll be up to you. And we talked about it a little bit more, and he said, well, if you go that, I think the first thing he says, well, if you want to go that way, maybe run the 500, run the speedways maybe, mm-hmm. the 3 500s and part-time effort. And I'd already thought about that, and I figured that would be one of the things that would come up. I said, Roger, the desire's not there is why I don't want to do it. And if I'm going to run those 3, I'm going to run them all. If I've got the desire to run those, I've got the desire to run the whole series. So if I don't have the desire to run the series, I don't have it to run those either. And I said, I really don't want to do it that way. One reason, I've always felt I could never do that and be current, mm-hmm. which again takes away competitiveness, So that's another reason I didn't want to do it that way. And I always felt like, one reason I got out, I said, the hardest parts of the decision was feeling like I was letting the team down on not going for the 5th win.
Sorry. I don't even know what light that is.
That's my light.
All we're going to do is ask if he ever regretted retirement. He's going to answer no. I'm going to say, what's your role now with Marlboro Team Penske? And he's going to say Marlboro's been out of the sport for a long time. And then I'm going to give him...
I can't answer it that way. Oh, I can... Yeah, no.
What?
No.
No what?
Done.
We got to put the gratifying to it.
Yeah, no.
No, thank you.
I'll try to shorten it.
No.
I keep getting off into...
No, but that's...
This is awesome. We can make a whole documentary now.
But the whole point is that I said, because I did this when I did the Centennial interviews, you just take my voice out of it, put on the screen, black screen, white letters, talk about, you could just play this whole thing.
Well, with everybody else, I mean, honestly, one of my ideas for that I took to the new president, Joe, he wanted to meet you really bad, but he had a dinner. Joe Hale, super enthusiastic, ambitious.
All right.
He's going to take us out of this and into the future. But
Yeah, good.
one of my ideas was we need to do like a full blown for every exhibit, 45-minute to an hour piece, like 30 for 30 level. So this is our first attempt at that.
All right.
Attempt.
Great. Oh, I'm the guinea pig.
Yeah, that's it. No, this is amazing.
Test driver.
This
Yeah, that's another one we could talk about. Yeah, Danny, well, but that's why it all fit. Danny and I were talking when I did the interview. He goes, Jesus Christ, my first year with Penske, I think I did 52 days of testing. Well, yeah, because you were laid up.
Yeah.
And there, Rogers used to, Uncle Bobby or you or whoever. And
Right.
He said, my God, I got thrown to the wolves. Right. I go, that's why half you guys are good. The tire testing, Parnelli put in 2,000.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he should have been rolling in that, thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Are we good? Yep. Did you ever regret retirement? Did you, when you saw the Mercedes engines, did you ever say, gee, that would have been fun?
Did I regret retirement? Well, no, I can honestly say not regretted it. I mean, there's times that I wanted to think about it, that would have been, they almost tempt me, but it took me longer to say almost tempt me than I thought about it. Like when the Mercedes engine came out, the pushrod motor. That thing was so strong, it was, whoa, that would have been a lot of fun, a lot of fun. But, that thought was through about that quick and done. So there's really never been a time that I've ever regretted it, or that I've ever even seriously, like I said, the Mercedes engine, make you think like that for a split second, but never seriously considered it.
Talk about Roger Penske as a boss, a mentor, a friend, a co-worker. You and Roger have been together since 1978.
Yeah, all the above. He's just, we just fit, I think, right off the bat. Roger's a team player, he's a team organizer, organizes the team and gets it going and keeps it going. But he understands the value. Even back then, he understood the value of team play, And there was teamwork in the team, but back then there wasn't a lot of teamwork with drivers, and even teams. They'd have, even in the same team, they'd have their separate little, maybe get-togethers or whatever, and not a lot of full sharing of information. And when I started with Roger, he was already doing that. He was already starting that team concept. And I understood the team concept because my brother and I grew up with it. Mm-hmm. We utilized each other as the team concept. So I was using the team concept unknowingly with my brother, because we both felt like if we can help each other to the next level, we got advantage over everybody else, we're good. And that's exactly what the team concept is. So I immediately blended with the way Roger operated, and so then it's a matter of just, doing your best job and getting the results, but just his professionalism, his the way of running the team, and honesty, and pride not getting in the way, ego, like when he was building his own cars and had his name on the chassis. He's a competitor, and this place he loves. And if his car he didn't feel was up to speed, his ego did not get in the way at all. He was the first to say, put that thing on the bench. Let's go get this or go get that and get competitive. And it was being competitive and producing that was important. And, for him and for all of his sponsors and all the people that rely on him, his way of making everybody feel a part of, not working for. And to me, if you're a part of, you dig deeper. And he's always had a knack for, getting that across the board, whether it's in the racing, the race industry, and the team, whether it's in his businesses. That's the way he operates.
Talk about your role since you've retired. You've been with the team as an advisor, I think is the title, since '93. What's Rick Mears' role with Marlboro Team? See, I can say Marlboro Team Penske.
My role with Team Penske now is, I've been backing things down a little bit, and this team doesn't need a lot of help. From my end anyway. But I still help with what I can, basically. If there's anything that pops up, I can help. Like I said, I've been backing it down a little bit, and Roger and the guys have been gracious enough to kind of let me do it, and and stay involved because it's hard to walk away from something you've done most of your life. But so I still help with what I can a little bit here and there, and was spotting for some time, and now kind of getting away from that a little bit. May still, if we need it, if it's needed, but just whatever pops up. Just like always, if something pops up, I can be useful with.
Now this almost sounds Oprah-ish. Is there a regret? Does Rick Mears have a regret when he looks back at his career, whether any part of it? Is there anything you say, boy, I really wish I would have done that different, or like you said, was it pretty real nice how one thing led to the next?
It really flowed on its own, and really no regret. There isn't anything I could do different, and have any better outcome. Anything I could do different could do nothing but make it worse, probably. But so no regrets at all. Everything went the way it was supposed to for me, And you get a few aches and pains. You get things. It's all. To me, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, if somebody had to say, you've got to say at least one thing. The only thing it might be would be the fact that, not regret, but I feel bad that I didn't give the team another shot at 5. I felt like I was letting them down. I don't regret it for me, but I feel like I let them down by maybe not sticking in longer and going for a 5th. Even though the reason I didn't do it is because I knew where I was at, I probably wouldn't get the 5th anyway.
And the last one, please somewhere in it use my 4 wins or my 4 wins at the Speedway, and somewhere in it use my 6 poles or 11 front rows. What does, like you said, when you drove in the first time, it was big. It was amazing. What did Indianapolis Motor Speedway mean to Rick Mears for the last 40 years?
Well, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has, meant my life, my livelihood, It's allowed me so many other opportunities, over my lifetime. Having the four wins here, like I said, I'd never dreamed of anything like that could happen. So it's an unbelievable feeling to have the 4 wins here at this place. Getting 6 poles. I don't know if I've had 6 poles anywhere else, but I loved qualifying here, and it meant a lot for me to get a pole here. I won another race. I could add that to race wins in my book, and also the thank you to the teams. But the 6 poles, the 4 wins at Indianapolis Motor Speedway is just I don't know how to put it. It's hard to put in terms what it means to an individual like that.
And I promise this is the last one unless Luke
No
has
problem.
one. Talk about, and you see it when you walk down pit road now, you saw the mutual respect that you respect the drivers that drove here, whether it was the Danny Sullivans or Roberto, whoever it is, they mutually respect you. Indianapolis, if you will, success breeds mutual respect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to basically talk about the quality of IndyCar drive. You and I had to talk about NASCAR once and whatever.
Yeah.
But how IndyCar drivers or the Indy 500 is really a special breed.
The IndyCar racing is it's one of its in its own. I mean, there's no other series that really compares to it, and I think especially now, we've been getting more guys coming in from other series into the IndyCar series, and we've always had respect for each other as drivers, over the years. You know, I've always respected, you know, the Al's, the Bobby's, the Parnelli's, the AJ's, Mario, because I know how difficult it is. I know what they had to go through, you know, even though not in that time, but it had to be even tougher. But so, you know, that it's always generated that mutual respect. And I think if it doesn't from somebody, or if somebody doesn't really respect some of the accomplishments that some of these guys did in the past, they aren't going to get what they want in the future. You know, because to me, it takes that to learn what you need to learn. I mean, it's like when I have somebody come up and really start questioning about what it takes to run this corner, when the wind's blowing here, when it's doing this, when it's doing that, you can tell the genuine interest, and that's because they're interested in doing well, and they know what the place means, and it's a part of the respect, you know, as far as wanting to do well here.
Luke, you got anything?
I don't know
else
if that got to what you wanted or not.
No,
but
you got it. No, no, it's perfect. Luke, you need anything else?
Yeah, some driving advice when I get back into karting.
Hey, Luke, did you say the next thing here was on roadsters?
Yeah, they're trying to shift some stuff around,
Okay,
but we've
answer. Okay, shut up. Hang on. How you know Parnelli Jones? You know the history of the sport. Can you imagine driving around this track? You drove in a roadster once.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a big fan of driving old vintage cars, but being in a roadster on the bricks at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, was that a man behind the wheel, or was that a man? That was tough.
We must have had computers and mechanical people back then. There's no way a human could do that. No.
So to drive on the bricks.
To drive in the roadsters, and again, I did get to play with one a little bit, and I couldn't believe it on a little small skid pad. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like to run around this joint at the speeds, that they were running, on the tire that they're running, and the low level of grip that they had to have. The men were men. I got to say it. Yeah, but I can't imagine what it took to do that.
Thank you.
Although you'll probably have to cut the men were men part out now, because that wouldn't be correct.
I was handing out cigarettes to the little kids.
Yeah.
All right, Rick, one more time, one big clap in front of your face for me.
It wasn't very big. Is it big enough?
Yeah, big slapper.
So then in 70...
You aren't going to use that in anything.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those memes or whatever they call it on the internet.
Sorry.
Oh, no. So 77 then, you come to Indianapolis. I mean, like you said, who would have even thought a year ago? You hadn't even been in an IndyCar.
Right.
Art brings you here in the Pink Lady IndyCar number 90. What was the Indy experience like the first time? You're a level person, but coming here the first time, this would be pretty damn cool.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was outstanding. You know, it just couldn't believe it, basically. But on the other side of that coin, I didn't grow up with Indy in mind, so I didn't study it. I didn't think about the history of the Speedway. I didn't think about, you know, a lot of those things. So I took it for granted, basically, a little bit. Unknowingly. So, yeah, it was cool, and yeah, it's Indy. But again, it was my first time, and the pressure, you know, my first time here, first everything, and usually the first things weren't the toughest for me to deal with. And so, but just, I remember, you know, coming in this place, the first thing that just was struck awe was the size compared to anywhere I'd ever been, you know. And it was just so big and so spread out, and long straightaways, long corners. You know, that was just almost overpowering, you know, just the size of the place. that was first thing to hit me anyway. And then as time went on, as we're here, then going through the procedures and you know what you have to do to get around, and you know, in the garage areas, and you know, and all the people you see, and the numbers of people, especially when you get toward race weekend or qualifying weekend, and you know, it just. But it was a slow build, you know, because you're here for the month, and it just kind of gradually came on. So that stuff never really jumped out at you a lot as the month was growing. It just kind of snuck up on you, except race day. Then it's just you know, another story. But just the whole thing was, you know, I was having a ball. You know. I was scratching my head a little bit because we weren't fast enough, you know, and I know by the time we got here, and Art was wanting to run 2 cars, and we didn't really have the funding. And matter of fact, that one of my first lessons about Penske happened, you know, at that time here. Again, he's way out of my league. You know, I'm doing this, but that's, again, another out of reach. Never dreamed of it. But so, you know, we started having motor problems because we'd had a couple of races now, and everything was fresh when Art got it from Bill. And we were getting mileaged out on parts and pieces, and we started losing motors and losing track time and trying to get up to speed, and so I remember George, you know, trying to help us out, getting us some parts and pieces to put one of our blown motors back together to get us some more track time and get going again. And, you know, we had a lot of help from a lot of people like that. But I remember the Penske lesson, and our garage was great. You know, they did a great job. Everything was clean, and, you know, everything was neat, but it wasn't Penskeized by all means, you know. But and this was back before the drivers really started bringing money to the teams. But I knew Art was struggling, and I remember thinking, God, if I could just help, how can I help, you know? And I was walking in the garage one night, and I'd met some people through Caterpillar, through construction and that kind of thing, and I thought, you know, maybe I could talk to somebody like that to see if I could help generate a couple of dollars to help Art out. And I remember just as I was walking in the garage and turning to go to our garage, I'd been thinking about that. And I walked by Penske's garage, and I looked in the garage door, and I go, wait a minute. Presentation. You know, I hadn't really thought about it because I was never in that end of it. Just give me the steering wheel.
Right.
Presentation. And I thought, if I had these guys I was just thinking about on my arm right now, trying to ask them for help, and we walked by that garage to get to mine, where are they going to want to turn off? You know, and that was the first lesson that I learned from Penske, you know, before I knew anything about Penske. But it just made sense, you know. And again, not that ours was bad. It just wasn't the same. You know, not everything had a place, but it wasn't all painted the same color. And all that's not money. That's it's thought, it's elbow grease, planning. You know, it wasn't dollars that made it look that way. It's planning. But anyway, that was the first lesson. But back to the race. I'm sorry.
No.
But it, you know, when it came time to get to qualifying, you know, back then you had 3 attempts, and so here we go. It's time to go qualifying weekend, and I don't remember a lot of what led up to it. You know, all the stuff went all the normal hoopla around qualifying weekend, which was amazing. You know. But as far as my end with the racing, we go out and we try to qualify, and we're just a little shy, you know. And so I'm scratching my head trying to figure out what I can do different, you know, to try to. We're a mile and a half or 2 mile an hour short at the time, And so we go out and make the second attempt, and I'm still shy. So I had one attempt left, and I'm sitting on the wall, getting frustrated and thinking, what can I do? I'm thinking about the corners and how I got through them and the balance of the car and how I can change something to gain, And I was sitting there scratching my head, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, Mears." I looked up, and it was Roger walking down pit lane. He said, "How you doing?" And if I remember right, this is the first conversation we'd ever had. Not a conversation, but time we'd spoken. And he said, "How you doing?" I said, I'm scratching my head here. I'm just trying to figure out what I can do to, try to make a little difference." And he says, "Well, I tell you," he said, "just don't put it in the fence. That'd be the worst thing you could do." I agree. But he was just reassuring me that would be the worst thing that could happen, And so I said thanks, and and off he went down the pit lane. And so eventually I got in the car, and we made our third attempt and didn't make it. And I remember after we didn't qualify, I was sitting on the wall and I was trying to console myself. Didn't have a job, didn't make any money, didn't have a house. But I remember sitting there thinking, well, maybe in a year I'll have another year's experience under my belt somehow, and being in a little newer equipment, and maybe have a shot at it next year. Little did I know, that the next year I'd be with the men just walked down pit lane and in the best equipment, there.
So in your heart of hearts, though, sitting on the wall, you knew, or you had the desire, the bug had bitten you to come back to Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I could say I was pointing at obviously Indy bug had bitten me, but I was just thinking at that time, I think I was thinking more because I didn't even have a ride.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have no job, no whatever.
Right.
The future.
I don't know if I knew for sure that ride would be totally gone at the time I was thinking it, right after qualifying. But I felt like, I think inside that we had made a decent enough showing that there might be other opportunity. I wasn't thinking Penske by all means. That was way out of my sight. I was just thinking, of all the other teams, there might be a possibility of getting an opportunity. And I felt like we were in it enough and had done enough that it may continue. I didn't know if I was going to go back to running backhoes or not for sure, Again, because I wasn't at a point of making a living at it yet. It was kind of at the crossroads. And I was still working, I think, in between. But or I was at that time, still operating. But so that was just kind of my thought process. Hopefully in another year, maybe something will happen. I can get a little newer equipment and another year's experience before we try this again. And I'd remembered Parnelli. He was almost, because knowing him through the desert and everything, I remember he was almost against me running here, because one of his things was, you got to be ready when you go to Indy. The first showing you make, you want to make the best showing you can make the first time there. And now I think me being in the equipment I was in, it didn't hold true quite as much because there was not a lot of expectation there. Now looking back, I didn't know at the time. At the time I got the opportunity, I was going, And but now when I think about it, I think, well, maybe it was better I didn't make the show. That way it allowed me to do a better job the next time I came back. But so then after, not having that, then selling cars in Phoenix, and having met Bobby at Pikes Peak, And Bobby was the original. You know, he was helping me out in the early years, even with Sugai those first few races. You know, because I'd met him at Pikes Peak and he'd run a desert race with us. He would help me at a track. You know, he would take me out and run me around a track and say, here's where you should run, what to do, not to do, that kind of thing. And he was a big help in that respect. And then, you know, once I started driving for Roger, then it had Michael or had Tom and Mario were doing it. And Bobby still helped too, but Parnelli, you know, he could help to a point, but he wasn't real current at the time in driving the cars, and I didn't see as much of him as I did Bobby at the time. So anyway, now I'm out of a ride, and Gallus gives me the opportunity and Bobby to go sell cars. Well, in the meantime, I guess Bobby, friends with Teddy Yip, and Teddy Yip decided he wanted to be a car owner. So I'd been knocking on doors trying to get a ride, and there were a few things that looked like it could possibly happen, but nothing really. Still unknown. So all of a sudden, I guess Bobby talks Teddy into buying the M16s from Simpson that he had purchased from Roger, which allowed me to run the Eagle. So he purchased those M16 McLarens, and Bobby said, buy those cars and hire this kid. This is what you're going to do, Teddy. And so Bobby basically got me my second ride. And you know, it was a year newer car or whatever, or not a lot newer because we were progressing a year or two in the same deal, but it was more up to date. And so that allowed us to start finishing out that year, you know, run the last several races, whatever it was. And we ended up running fifth, I think, at Milwaukee, which was my best finish in an IndyCar at the time. And so, you know, I was tickled to death. We were having fun, and then all of a sudden Teddy decides at the end of the year he doesn't want to do it anymore. So now I'm out of a ride again.
Until you go to the Colorado 500, which is the ultimate game changer.
Yep.
What happened? Explain Colorado 500. It's not a race. It's a massive gathering of a bunch of heroes.
Yeah, just a lot of fun. You know, Wally Dallenbach and his family put it on, and it started at their place in Basalt. And that was in the early stages of it. I don't know how many years it had happened. It seemed like this was about the second or maybe second or third year.
Third or fourth, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So there was only 35 of us on the ride, and it was a pretty close racing group, close-knit group. You know, Unzers were there, and Parnelli was there, and you know, a lot of the guys from, I think, NGK back then, and plug guys and oil guys, and just people involved in racing, you know, and Wally, and I'm drawing blanks on names. All the guys were there, but it was a race group. Well,
And it was motorcycles.
motorcycles, yeah. I'm sorry, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we Wally put it on. We started at his place, and it was a motorcycle ride, 3-day motorcycle ride up in the foothill or up in the mountains. And we go to, you know, Basalt one night, you know, in a different town, tell you ride another night, whatever. And they'd meet us, they'd take our bags and stuff around and meet us at the little hotel that they'd get lined up. So we'd go to a different town each night and stay, but a ride all day during the day, off-road. Just a lot of fun. And I, you know, like I started on motorcycles, so it was a kick to me. But you know, all these guys are on it, and then Roger shows up on it. And Penske and which I didn't think a lot about it then. Knowing him now, I'm thinking, what was he doing on a motorcycle? You know, but not knowing much about Roger then, I thought, oh, okay, he just showed up like Unzers and the rest of them. You know, they showed up for the ride. And so we go ride, I think, the first day, and it's just such a fun event. We just had so much fun. These old ghost towns and mining towns and everything we go through, and beautiful country. And so I forget which town it was in, we met at that night and spent the night. And the next morning we got up and getting ready to go on the next day's ride. And Roger and I's bikes were parked pretty close together. And so we're getting the bikes ready to go for that day's ride. And Roger and I started talking. And we're chatting about things. And I said, I said, I heard you thinking about hiring so-and-so next year. And he says, no, not as far as I know. And he says, I hear you thinking about driving for so-and-so next year. And, no. I mean, there was some conversation with, I think it was with the Phoenix-based Fletcher at the time. It sounded like there could be some promise there. But nothing had happened at that point. And I said, no. So we talk a little bit more. And we're getting close to getting ready to go, and he turns around to me and says, hey, he says, I've got something in mind. He said, give me a call before you make a deal with anybody else. Well, I mean, I about fell down and knocked all the other motorcycles down with it. I about fell over. It was as big a surprise to me as it was to anybody. Because, again, at that point, he was still out of my league. I'm still trying to find somebody with a little newer car than what I'd been driving, And for him to come up with that, it was a huge shock to me. But
so let me
needless.
Just, what the hell was Roger doing driving a motorcycle?
Well, needless to say, after that was said, I stayed pretty close the rest of the ride. If he fell off, I'd pick him up, straighten his handlebars, dust him off, and get him on down the road. Now, he never fell off. He rode a bike just like he does everything. He rode it for no more than he had ever done. He rode it great, But I don't know, but I've thought about it over the years. After working for Roger all these years and seeing how he does things, it may not have been, but it almost. I thought, part of the reason he was there was obviously for that. But it was knowing him, it was 2 or 3 fourfold. He wanted to see me away from the track, and see how I handled myself, I guess, or whatever. So I was constantly trying to impress him on the rear wheel of the motorcycle everywhere I went. After that conversation, but and then the next time we met, and he says, I got something in mind. Meet me at the farmhouse, and we'll go over what it is.
You give the 2-minute version of meet me in the morning at the farmhouse. Tell us what that was.
Yeah, that
was at Michigan.
Yeah, that was at Michigan. And I don't know that we'd even really talked, because, Roger's always kept everything close to the vest. So obviously I wasn't saying anything to anybody. And I don't think he did either. So he said, meet me at the farmhouse, and after the race, and he said, or whatever morning it was, he said, and I'll tell you what I've got in mind. So I said, great. And to this day, he still says I showed up an hour earlier than I was supposed to, which I didn't think I had. But now when I think back about it, whoever met me at the door was still in their robe. So maybe maybe I was a little early, but so we just sat down, and he said, here's what I've got in mind. He said, Mario's going to be missing some races next year, run for the World Championship with Lotus, and he said, I want a part-time driver to fill in. He said, I'll guarantee you the 3 500s, which Mario was going to be in also, so that would be a third car for those. And he said, I'll guarantee you at least 3 others. So I'll guarantee you at least 6 races. The others will probably be ones that he can't make, and you'll fill in for him. So I played hard to get for about 5 seconds. And, and I mean, a part-time deal for this man, to me, was by far as good as could be with a full-time deal with most anybody else. So, like I said, I'd never dreamed of, at that point even, that was still way out of my league. So to get that opportunity was it was outstanding.
So what do you remember, because again, going back to the Mears gang, telling your dad, your mom, your brother, I'm driving for Roger Penske?
Oh, I mean, I can't remember how it all, went down, because that was just kind of, it seemed like every time I turned around, I had some news for them. You know, they just kept happening. And my brother was doing the same thing, running. You know, and he was making steps in different areas in different ways, and again, just having fun like I was. You know, but we'd had conversations as we saw things happening like that, and I think it was. We stopped at Ontario, which is the first time we were come back from Riverside or someplace. And this was kind of when the IndyCar thing was just starting to cross our minds. And remember watching him run, and my brother and I had a conversation, and, you know, because we always worked together as a team, even though we raced against each other, because we knew if we could help each other to the next level, it was helping both of us, you know. And we felt the same way about getting opportunities to drive other things. Every time one of us got an opportunity to drive something new, you know, that helped the other one, you know, come along. So we always, you know, talked about that. So anytime something like that happened, I'd go straight to him, Mom and Dad, and, you know, everybody, and say, hey, what do you think about this? You know, there's an opportunity. But it was just, again, it was a fairy tale for all of us.
Yeah. So the first year, we'll talk about the 3 wins just briefly, but Indianapolis, you're with Roger Penske, you're on the outside of the front row, you qualified an average of over 200 miles an hour. You always put things in perspective, but that had to be like a gee, pinch me moment. This is pretty cool.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was incredible, you know. I mean, fortunately, before we got here, what helped take a little bit of that out of it for me was that we'd already had some decent performance in a couple of races before I got here. And so, you know, I was kind of starting to feel more comfortable. And what I had to get more comfortable with was this place and, you know, with that car. But, no, again, it was part of the fairy tale, you know, the qualifying third, you know, front row. But then the fairy tale starts turning real quick when the first thing you start hearing is the rookie going to be able to handle it? Is he going to make a mistake on that's when Indy starts showing you who Indy is, you know. And again, I didn't know a lot about it, but you know, the media surrounding this event and everything, I was learning. I was just starting to learn all of that. And but then that was an example of what this place can do. You know, all of a sudden, eyes were on the rookie on the front row. Is he going to be able to handle it? Is he going to make a mistake at the start? Is he going to be, because it's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You know, it's the main event. And again, I was just starting to learn that, you know, about that stuff. But no, it was another step of the fairy tale.
And like you said, you know, it's the pressure, and you're under the microscope for an extra week back then. It's an entire month. You'd qualify on the first weekend. There'd be a second weekend of qualifying. And yeah, you take that front row photo the day after. Everybody's looking at that for a week.
Yeah.
You know, can Rick Mears get through this? Or, you know, you've got Sneva and Danny and Gaius next to you.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Sneva and Gaius next to you. And Sneva was over 200 the year before. And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing setup for you.
No, it was, and that was kind of where I started learning about the value of qualifying on the pole, especially here. You know, is that you just want a race that you get to celebrate for as long as you do when you win a race anywhere else. You know, the next week or 2 weeks, depending on what the schedule had been over the years. You know, you and your sponsors and your team and everybody get to celebrate that for a good period of time before the race itself happens. But, I mean, I didn't think about it quite in those terms, but I was just starting to learn that process.
Yep.
And to me, you know, I'd never had a pole yet at that point. And I don't know if I'd qualified. I don't know what my best qualifying was at that point. That may have been.
Yeah.
One of my best. But so now it's okay. It's race time now. Now what are we going to do? And I forgot where we were going with that.
Well, no, you were saying all the build up to the race. So I was going to go into the race.
Yeah.
You're on the front row. It's your first Indy 500. Just again, your memories. You obviously didn't win that day, but that was as memorable day as ever.
Yeah.
You had some car problems, but talk about
that whole thing. Along with qualifying on the front row and starting to see all the and this is a continuation of the media about the rookie on the front row. Seeing all that, it started making me more and more determined that I was not going to make a mistake. I don't care what. That was always my game plan anyway, but that just reinforced, that I was not going to make a mistake because I didn't want them saying, see, I told you,
Yeah.
And plus I don't like making mistakes because I don't like to admit them. So, but, so when that started leading into the race, and I thought, okay, no mistakes. So part of my no mistake deal was stay relaxed, which is the way I ended up going to on most all races. Just, stay relaxed, no mistakes. Get the first laps under your belt, see where the track is, where the car is at, and all that kind of thing. That's just kind of my normal strategy. But that was in my mind about, okay, I'm going to stay in the hotel room as long as I can, because of all the hoopla going on around race day. I'm going to stay in the hotel as long as I can, stay relaxed, keep out of the light. So I did that, and then I went over to the garage, and I thought, okay, I'm going to stay in the garage here until time to go, and stay again just stay relaxed. So in all my calmness and coolness and collectedness, or however you want to, I was late getting to the car, and so now I had to get into the hurry up mode, and so I run, jump in the car, and get buckled in. Okay, the race gets started now. But the hoopla of the whole thing, going out through Gasoline Alley to the start-finish line, and because of the extra put on you, you're up there with your teammate, and you're with Penske, and and in the front row, and all of that, it was just, it's a tremendous spectacle. But so you go through all that, and finally, okay, it's time to get in the car once I got out there. And so I'm late getting in the car, so I've got to do everything in a hurry, and I throw my helmet on, and I run it through the loops and give it a quick yank, and it cinches down, and I jump in the car, and we throw all the belts and everything on, get everything ready to go. And, okay, now it's time to go, and we get the things fired up. The butterflies are going crazy at that point. The butterflies for me always start at the driver's meeting here. That's kind of when they would always start. But once the engine fires, then they go away because now you're thinking about what you're doing. But so the things, we fire it up, we take off, and we're doing the parade lap and everything, and I'm thinking, no mistakes. And I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of the rookie making a mistake. So we come around, it goes green, stand on the gas, start up through the gears. I go to third gear, and it falls on its face. And my first thought was, no, I didn't miss a gear. And so I grab, and feel around and put it back in third again, same thing. And in the meantime, I'm ducking like this. My first thought, oh, they're going to think this rookie screwed up. And my second thought is they're going to run over me from the back, And so I go to fourth, and it's the same. Go back to third, and it's the same. Go back to second, Now, and second doesn't work. So, basically what had happened, we had two top gears. So it was a huge gap from second to third. And, once I tried the two and saw they were both the same, then you just pick one and keep going. But it took a long time to get the boost. They had the big single blowers in, and it took a long time to build boost. and I'm losing spots right and left, and I'm kind of trying to stay out of the way. And so I get going. Once I get the boost up and we start running, I'm thinking, we're pretty competitive here. I started working my way back through the guys and picking up places, and but the problem was every time we'd have a yellow, that was the last year of the pacer lights. And second gear was too low for the pacer light speed. And fourth gear, third and fourth, it was just way too high, and it was just chugging and beating and banging and wasn't good on things. And but I think we worked our way up. I think we got as high as fifth, if I remember correctly. And I really felt like the car, was, if we could stay with the track and make changes that we needed and everything else, that we had a very decent shot at a very good finish first year. But then we'd have another yellow, and I'd lose 4 or 5 places by the time it'd get going again after the yellow. We'd go after we went green, and then I'd have to start working my way back. But I could always kind of get myself back to where we were. And then we had an engine problem, and probably I was probably over revving the thing in second, trying to get it closer to the boost, building up quicker, going to fourth or third, to get it back up to speed, and probably did some damage there, and it finally gave up halfway through. But I really felt the car was going to be pretty competitive that day if we could have run all day.
Was there the fairy tale Roger puts his arm around you after the first race and says, "Good job, kid," or what do you remember?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember detail, but it was, typical Roger. It was always about going forward, good job. And knowing, me being new, and he had been with me since day one. I mean, that was one of the greatest things about him. When I started, it was, I've got Tom and Mario to go out and stand on the gas. You just get laps. Use your pace at your speed, at your pace, and learn. That's all you need to do. That's all he was asking of me. And which really helped take that pressure off of me, because you've got the pressure of now there's no more excuses. I'm not in a 4-year-old car. I'm not in a 3-year-old car. I've got teammates that I've got to measure up to. And now the first race again, there was not a lot of pressure because I hadn't set a benchmark yet. Other than my 5th at Milwaukee, I had to beat that. But he was great at taking that pressure off me to, and let me learn it at my pace. But again, we started getting fairly competitive fairly quick, and the more competitive I got with my teammates, then the more pressure I had on myself to, put the numbers on the board. And but Roger was, he never in all my years with him said, "You need to do this." Now I don't know how to take that. Maybe he just didn't say it, or maybe I was doing it myself enough that he didn't need to. Because I always felt like I put as much pressure on myself as I ever did let anybody else. But he was always good about that. And the only thing that kind of jumps out a little bit was I remember when Bobby retired, or when Bobby moved on from this team, I remember him saying something along the line of, "You're going to have to be the qualifier now,"
Mm-hmm.
that it was my turn, it was my time. I just vaguely remember that, and whatever it wasn't in a negative way by all means. It was in a supporting way.
More of the passing of the torch.
Exactly. Yeah. It was actually probably more of a pat on the back of, here you go. And but no, he's always been great about that, and I knew it, and I felt like I was in a position to do it at that point, Anyway, but and again, qualifying on the pole here, and the second time that was.
We're gonna get that in 2 seconds, but I used to get
Yeah.
an overall big picture. 78 was a huge success.
Yeah.
You won first race at Milwaukee, whether, no matter how you won it, you won it.
Yep.
You won in Atlanta, and you won at Brands Hatch. So, again.
Covered all the bases.
Yeah, so basically almost repeat what I said, but I mean, it was a super successful first year with Roger Penske for Rick Mears.
Oh, it was. I mean, you know, I remember the first time I sat in Penske's car at Phoenix, and I went out there and I started leaning on the thing, and it just kept accepting it and more and more and more. And finally I got, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. And I basically just did everything that I was doing exactly the way I was doing it in the other cars. Just the numbers were different, you know. And that's when I learned the value of having the right equipment and the right people and support and everything else, you know. That you know, it takes all of us to make it happen. And but no, that first year was just, again, it just continued the fairy tale, you know. Getting our first win at Milwaukee, even though I didn't feel like I'd won it because Al ran out of fuel in front of me before I had a chance to pass him. But you know, we got that first win at Milwaukee, and then Atlanta and Brands Hatch, and we ran third, I think, at Mossport on the road course there. But no, it was so we covered all the disciplines, you know, the road course, the Speedway, the big oval, and Milwaukee, short flat track, you know. So we covered all the venues in the 3 wins. And then we had some decent finishes in others. And as it turned out, we ended up running 10 races, you know, which I didn't understand back then. But again, after time with Roger, and I watched it happen with other, you know, drivers that came in part-time. And he promised 6. If things hadn't been going well, we'd have probably run 6, you know, which is understandable. It is business, by the way, too, even though it's just my hobby and my fun. But as we started getting results, he started creating more opportunities, you know, to run more races. You know, that gave him something to take to a sponsor and say, hey, guys, what do you think? Why don't we give him some more miles? You know, help the kid learn here. And I'm sure he sold it in a lot of different ways. But and I'm sure he came out of pocket, too, at times if he needed to. But so that ended up allowing me to get more and more experience that first year and more results and that kind of thing. So as it turned out, it just continued the fairy tale all the way through, and still not knowing for sure what was going to happen, you know.
So the next year, you're back at the Speedway in '79. It's all too cliched and easy. You're on the pole, you win the race. Another 2 for 2 on the front row. This time you've got Sneva, who was on the pole the year before, and Big Al and the Chaparral on the outside of the front row. Your first Indy win. I mean, your first pole. What a great year for Rick Mears at the Speedway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just, within a year of never dreaming of being in an IndyCar to almost within a year's time to be at that, well, the front row position for sure, but then the following year on the pole and to win the race, it was just, again, I look back at it, you know, even in the win, and well, we'll get into that at the other part of the story with the wins, but that sitting on the pole, one of Roger's favorite sayings over the years has always been timing is everything, you know, and I was learning that as things happened, and I realized timing was everything on that pole for my first pole to have, because the pole sitter at the time, and I was the last one to be able to knock the pole sitter off, was his ex-driver. And it dawned on me coming down pit lane when I saw the smile on his face. You know, it was one of those smiles you see very rarely from Roger. And again, that was the part of the timing is everything. Because, you know, I had no idea we could sit on the pole. I wasn't sure. I knew we could run well, you know, and I knew we had a decent car, But I was still learning how to qualify too. And again, that pole, some things that happened during that run that I learned, But, I remember sitting in line waiting to qualify, and Tom was on the pole, and AJ was ahead of me and somebody else, and I could hear the announcers talking about who's out next to qualify and who's, got a shot at Sneva and everything. And I remember when AJ went out and they're talking about, oh yeah, the first lap was fast enough, second lap was fast enough, everybody's going crazy, and then he has a motor problem and drops a cylinder or whatever, and starts slowing down, and I think I was the only car left to run at the time, and I remember the announcer saying, oh no, it's all over, he can't do it, oh no, Sneva's got it wrapped, basically got it wrapped up, and I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I haven't gone out yet. But I wouldn't say that physically because I didn't know if I could or not. So, but I thought, at least let me have a shot at it. So we go out and qualify. I ended up knocking Tom off, and that was the timing of everything with Roger. But during that run, that was part of learning that the learning curve never ends. That was a portion of it there, but because I was learning and I was thinking I was running pretty decent and qualifying and everything, but anyway, I think it was a second or third lap through three, running through three, and I'm trying to get everything I can get out of the car, and I go through three, and I start losing the front a little bit, and it starts washing out on the exit. I've got an idea where I'm going to come out at the end, but it's practice. I'd have just pedaled a little and made sure, because I knew it was going to be close. But this was qualifying, so it's time to leave it. And it kept getting wider and wider, and I'm thinking, man, it's getting closer and closer. I'm not sure if this is going to come out. And I remember when it got to the wall, I even leaned over on the other side of the car and braced myself because I thought it was gonna hit. But that was the time to take the risk, and it didn't hit, and it came off the corner. Like, oh, you got to be kidding me! And I stayed after it, and went on, and I had one more lap to go. So obviously, the next lap, I made the correction I needed going in to not have that happen on the exit. And so I made the correction, went through the corner, and on the way off the corner, everything was coming out fine. And I'm looking up at the wall as I'm heading for the point where I'd been, and I see my black mark out in the edge of the gray. And as I get to the corner, I'm looking at the black mark and it coming up at me, and I'm thinking, hell, I had a foot left. There was more room there than I thought. But that was me learning, but I hadn't ever touched it. And until it's like a curb feeler. Until you got a curb feeler, you don't know where it's at. But that was part of that learning curve of learning how to qualify and everything. But I ended up qualifying on the pole, and huge smile on Roger's face coming down pit lane.
Because you were just talking about the track and getting around, turns 1 and 3 are identical, aren't they? This track.
Pretty much.
I'm joking. Don't give me that. But this is by far the trickiest track. Everybody's overthought it. Everybody's thought of it perfectly. This track is not the nice symmetrical track everybody thinks Indianapolis Motor Speedway. 9 degrees, no, it's all completely different.
I think it'd be humanly impossible to make an identical racetrack, but no, it's all different. And even if you could make a track identical, it's going to be different because the wind direction changes. So, which is a huge part of it around here, the wind and keeping track of the flags. If the wind changes direction at all, if it's down the front straightaway, it carries you much more speed into one, which then tends to blow the front of the car out from the wind hitting you in the side on the exit and run out of room there. And opposite of that, as you're going into the wind into 3, you don't reach it as fast, and you've got more downforce on the car. Tends to pin the nose a little bit on entry in the earlier cars. I don't know, it's fairly similar with today's cars. So it's usually an easier corner to get through, without lifting, if you're at a stage where you can do it without lifting. But 2 and 4 are always my experimental corners. Excuse me. They, I'd always pedal in 1 and 3 as I'm building up to speed, pedal in 1 and 3, and then carry more throttle to 3 and 2 and 4, because you're approaching them at a lower speed than you are 1 and 3. And so those are always the corners I'd get flat first. And once I got those flat, then I'd start bringing the throttle and brake points together, in 1 and 3, until I got those down to where we were flat, if we could make it flat. But again, every time you went out, those were different. You had to adjust and make corrections and changes, for that day and condition.
Like you said, adjustment, then we'll get back to the win in 79. 79 was the last year you drove a flat bottom car, now ground effects car. Completely different than the ground effects cars that have come the next couple of years for you.
Yes. Yeah, that was, Bob Yenzer was on the team, and we were going from the PC6 to the 7. And the 7 was our first kind of semi-ground effects attempt. And, I was a rookie still, going into that next year after my rookie year. So, Bobby did all the testing on the PC7, and nothing that I haven't told Bobby. He didn't want me in the car anyway, so he knows. We laugh about it all the time. He and I got along great, even though we were teammates, but we weren't. In a sense, but I understood where he was coming from. I had no problem. He was. These days I'm old school, and he was old school in those days, and there wasn't so much teamwork going on at that time, and I understood that. And he had his pride and his ego, and I had mine too. I wanted to do it on my own as well, so we got along great in that respect. But anyway, he just soon I didn't get any testing in that PC7 and learn anything about it. So I didn't get any miles in it. So when it came time to race here, Roger knew that, and he said, and I'm still a rookie, and he says, what do you think as far as Indy this year? He said, I know you haven't had any miles early in the 7, had any experience with it. He said, do you want to run the 7 at Indy, or do you want to stay with something in the PC6? And he gave me the choice. So, I just thought about it a little bit. I thought, yeah, that makes plenty of sense to me. I mean, the car was good, and we'd learned things since the previous May race. And in the races after that, we'd learned how to make that car better, finishing out the year. So I knew we'd be better than we were probably the year before, even with the same car, with what we had learned. So I said, okay, that makes sense. Let's do that and just stay with the flat bottom car. And really, as it turned out in the race, before Bobby had the gearbox problems, I felt like we had him covered. I was doing my typical, the way I run every desert race. You got to get to the end. And, it was always about, working with the team and them making the decisions and changes on the car to follow the track and try to be our best at the end for the shootout. And we were getting close to that point, and okay, it's time to go. And I'd caught Bobby. I forget the sequence of how we came back together. But anyway, I'd gotten back to Bobby. And I don't remember if he was leading at the time or not, or he may have been. So we'd have been running second. And after one of the yellows and restarting, I got a run at him in one, and I didn't have enough to get him. And took the air off from my car and kind of put me up in the gray. And I was learning about turbulence and all that stuff. And just gathered it back up and started working back, and I felt we could run him back down. And I think we were just in a position to kind of make another push to get by him when he had the gearbox problem. And so again, I got to win the race, but I didn't feel like I won it because I didn't get to pass him, kind of like his brother at Milwaukee. But so, at that point, then, it was just a matter of keep our head down, no mistakes, and, and bring it home.
The thrill of the first Indy 500, the wreaths and the queens and sponsors and Borg Warner trophies and milk, and how does it all hit you when back then you were going up the ramp?
I don't remember any of it. It just went like this. This boils back down to me not growing up around here and following this. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it just, again, the fairy tale continues. The wreath, the milk, the pictures, the victory lane, the crowd, the group, the excitement. That's one of the main things you really notice, the excitement, not just in yourself and what's going on. As far as the meaning of this place, it's a total different excitement you see in the friends, the team, the family, the spectators. It's a different kind of excitement. You see, it's the Super Bowl. It's not just another race. And so that kind of filters through all of it. Everything is that way. Everything's up a level. That takes place. But it was just incredible. But the thing that I always come back to is not that I didn't appreciate it. I appreciated it greatly, but I didn't know what to appreciate or know how much to appreciate it at the time because it came so quick. And yeah, we partied. We had a great time. It was unbelievable, But by the next event, I was over it going to the next race. We got another one to win here. So it kind of goes away. This race comes and goes throughout the remainder of the year, and because of being Indy. But still, you've got to put that aside and go back to business for all the other events, for a championship or whatever the reason, or just to win races. That's why you're here. But I think I put it away fairly quickly and just continued on with business more so than I did later on, after I grew and learned more of this place. And again, not that I didn't appreciate it, but I just didn't know. I had to grow into Indy.
Is that a win that you were shaving a week later in a motel room, or I forget who tells this? Is that you that was finally dawned on?
Yeah, no, that was it was like 4 or 5 days later, or whatever it was, and it was that. I was just getting ready to go for the day, and I remember looking in the mirror, and it was like, it's just like a slap in the face, Now I wanted to do the double back flips, the cartwheels, and it just seemed like it took that long to sink in, because it's just like it. Again, I didn't understand it, what it meant. But no, it does definitely do that. It's one of those. Yeah, you're happy and you're excited, but you're also worn out. You've been here for a month working hard, and you're mentally exhausted. This Speedway has always been much more of a mental strain than a physical strain. So you're just mentally exhausted when the race is over. So it's kind of like you catch up afterward. It takes a little time for everything you come to your full senses and realize that you won this race,
And back then in '79 to the same as this year, with Penske, it's the team. It's truly a team effort. We'll get to a little while about you being an advisor now, but it's truly, like you said, the smiles on the team's faces to win Indies, a little bit more special than winning a Pocono, if you will. But talk about Penske and the team and the effort that they put into every driver, every hospitality meal. They want to make everything Penske perfect.
Well, that's it. And effort equals results, Roger's favorite saying, and it's attention to detail, and it's everybody doing their job to their best ability, and it's no one person makes any of it happen. Now, obviously, wait a minute. Let's start. I'm drawing a blank on where I was going to go with that.
We're talking about team and specialness of winning Indy. It takes a whole group of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's always about the team. I mean, that was one of the first things I was always asked. When I first got into IndyCar racing, there was always a big question for some reason. How much of it's car, how much of it's driver? That was always coming at me. And my standard answer was, hey, I've never been around a track very fast by myself, on my own. And a car doesn't go around track very fast by itself, so it takes both of us to make it happen. But, it takes the full team to make it all come together. And they all play a part. And it's like qualifying on the pole or qualifying anywhere at any event. To me, first of all, I want to be on the pole. It's good for my ego. But also that was for me, it was kind of a payback to the team for all the hours they put in. I mean, they work nonstop, daylight to dark, 6-7 days a week, whatever it takes. I get to have the fun driving the car, and we do our media work. We do different things, in between events and everything else, and travel and stay busy. But it's not the physical work they do, And I've always felt myself, because we used to build our own cars, and I've always felt so lucky that I got this part of it, But so qualifying at a race, it's like they bust their tails and do all they can do to give me the best tool I can have to go out there and get the job done. And so when I go out there, and qualifying especially, I'm going to put everything down on this lap that I can get. And it's kind of a payback to them for the, if I can sit on the pole and come in and see them smiling like that, then to me it's kind of like a thank you to them for giving me the stuff to do it with.
Pole is one special thing. In '79, that was one of the 3 times you won the championship. Talk about winning the championship. Short ovals, big ovals, road courses, street, the litany that we've all been through. But the specialness, if you will, of winning, you've won it 3 times, winning the season championship.
Yeah, to me,
consistency.
Yeah, no, it is. And again, it's the teamwork. It's the consistency of them giving, putting the tools out there for us as drivers to use. Any of the numbers that are put on the board is due to the team giving me the tools to be able to put that number up there. And that's what it takes to win a championship. They've got to do that day in and day out, week in and week out, throughout the year. And I've got to do the same thing in the seat.
Yeah.
And capitalize on, a lot of times when somebody has a good car and they've got a good shot at the race, they go just the wrong way. It's like, I've got to make this happen. I've got the opportunity. And they end up making a mistake that takes them out of that opportunity. And to me, it's kind of like desert racing. It's, if I've got the car that can make it happen, I've got to protect that thing. Mm-hmm. And make sure we get it in position to be able to capitalize on the opportunity I have. And so when that team works their tail off to give me that opportunity, I need to take care of it and make it happen. And not go off the handle and get excited and make a mistake. Well, that, just like the desert racing, until you get a checkered flag, you can't win anything. I just take the same scenario throughout the year that I would take through a race. Get the job done, keep adding them together, make no mistakes. If we've got a 5th place car on that day, I'm going to run 5th. If I can get 4th, if it's kind of laid out there where I can get it without making a mistake trying to get it, I'll take it. But if I've got a 5th place car, I want to make sure I finish 5th, not 6th. But I've got to finish 5th. If I end up 23rd because I was trying to get 4th, That's not good for the team. It's not good for the championship. It's not good for anything. So that was just always kind of the mindset I always kept throughout the season. But again, it comes right back to the getting the right equipment and the right people, surrounding yourself with the right opportunities to be able to make that happen. And that's where Roger and Team Penske have just been so outstanding. I mean, I remember I ran, I don't know how many races or possibly even years I ran that the thought of not finishing a race even crossed my mind. Mm-hmm. Because of equipment.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I always thought, I know I can make a mistake at any time, and in my day. It's my job not to do that. But as far as worrying about, having the car to complete the race and having the tools under me to do the part I need to do, it was just never even in the back of my mind that I might not finish this race because of an equipment failure. Mm-hmm. Even though it can happen, but that's just how good the team is. The confidence that they gave me, to put in them to be able to run like that and not even think about something not finishing.
Yeah.
And so it's all of that just keeps adding up throughout a season. But the main thing that I always loved about our championship and our series is that I felt like it was the one you had to be the most well-rounded to complete, And to me, that was very gratifying. Do I have a favorite on what I would rather do or not? Yes. If somebody says, do you want to race on the oval? You want to race on the road course? Okay, I'll take the oval. It suits my natural driving more so. But does that mean I don't like road courses? No, I love them, I don't think there's a track I've ever been on that I didn't like. I just like some more than others. But to win our championship, win our series, you had to be able to be pretty decent all the way across the board. And with me, it's always seemed like the faster the track, the more it suited me. And that even held true in road courses. A faster road course seemed to suit me more so than a slower road course. And a slower road course would suit me more than a street course, And for some reason, I had to learn those more. I had to work harder at figuring out how to make it happen on those, which was part of the fun.
So Caesar's Palace wasn't a whole lot of fun. Might have been fun, but...
Especially with the rear wing off.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, a little tight parking lot. It was still fun.
Right.
I still had fun, but...
That was about as far away from the
the fun
realm.
on the fun list.
Yeah.
They're all fun. There's just different levels of fun.
Yeah, I remember that. So let's actually speed forward to a couple of years. Let's go to 81, and we're not going to talk about Uncle Bobby and Mario. We're going to talk about, unfortunately, the pit fire. What caused the pit fire at Indianapolis? And
Don't start yet. You can ask the question and just.
I kind of know when they got loud.
Okay.
It's like everybody wants to be loud now.
Rick, can you just give me a big clap in front of your face? Over this one.
Just one?
Go ahead, Rick. There you go.
So like you said, you kind of set up, you had the dyno, but then you kind of set up your home base, if you will, down at the bottom of the mountain.
Right.
They were nice, and you cleaned up the sinks after.
Oh, yeah. The guy that owned the place was a real racer, and he loved having all of us there. And obviously we didn't destroy things. We took care of it. But that was just, we'd make it almost a holiday because you had to be up on the mountain at daylight to run your practice sessions. So you get up before daylight, and you travel take the race cars up the mountain to where the pavement ended, and to start your practice. And they broke it up into 3 groups, and you'd practice one segment one day. Then so you'd start at the beginning, and you'd run the first third of the course, and then there was an area between the 2 segments that you didn't run. That's where they staged everybody for the upper area. So you'd run the first session, then the next day you'd rotate sessions, segments. And you just keep rotating like that until you run all 3. The only time you ran the whole mountain was on the race, start to finish. So, there's 156 turns, and there's a lot of them that look alike but aren't. It may look like one of the dog legs that you run through wide open, but it's not. It's a dead stop switchback up the mountain. But so we'd run and get to practice session. We had to be off the mountain by 10 o'clock, so they open it back up to the public. So we get the cars back down the mountain after practice. We'd work on the cars. Anything we needed to get done for the next day, get it done. And then my brother and I would go back up on the hill in the rental cars and run up and down the mountain most of the day. In the rental cars, just trying to learn the mountain. And, like I said, every year you knew it better, and you started taking more and more chances, getting closer and closer to the edge. I mean, the third year I ran, I dropped a wheel off in a couple places, straightening things out, and carrying more speed because you've learned it. And we were fortunate enough to win it the third time out, and I thought, okay, that's enough. I'm getting too brave, but.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get you to say. Yeah, because you and Mario that one night at dinner, there's a difference between brave and stupid.
Right.
And you were getting to the point where you knew you could make up some time and do some things, and you were playing just getting stupid.
Yeah. You just start getting close to being able to get it over the limit, where you want to be and get in trouble. So, and at that time, the IndyCar stuff was all starting to take off too, around that same time. So that was. Probably, maybe if not for that, I may have gone on and run some more. Probably would have, because we were already making plans. That car that I won with, some guys out of Northern California, Newman Drager, a guy named Paul Newman, not the Paul Newman, but Paul Newman, and Doug Drager, they built the car. And it was, they got a Lola T300 Formula 5000 body and built this buggy to fit the body, basically. But the car was great. It worked great, except it was a little nose heavy. And I knew if we could lose some of the nose weight, I could get more to the ground and make the thing even quicker. And at that time, it had a pretty good advantage as it was. But because we were thinking about coming back the next year, and so I guess it was the IndyCar deal that kind of stopped it. But I'd already thought if we take that 4-cylinder Volkswagen out and we put a turbo 6-cylinder Porsche in the back, the extra weight will transfer the weight to the rear that I'm trying to get off the nose and get it to the ground better. Plus now we've eliminated altitude, being a problem. And we'd have the same power at the top as we start at the bottom with. And that thing would have knocked, I don't know how much time off the course at that time.
But that's when IndyCar racing and Bill
and it
Simpson
all started,
and all that
right.
came into play. So is that about where, because you'd known Bill for a couple of years leading up to that point, where did Bill Simpson come into this whole equation for you?
Well, Steve Richards was his off-road rep in the desert. And Simpson was one of the first sponsors we ever had, too, to help us out when we first started building the cars. And I think he supplied the first helmets that I started wearing, the first fire suits, all that stuff, shoes. But I'd never met him yet. It was all done through Steve Richards and Simpson Safety Equipment. So he had been helping me out, or my dad and all of us out for a while. It started back in the short track and buggies, let alone the desert. And so, Steve, I guess, was always kind of putting a bug in Bill's ear about, hey, let's see what this kid's doing, keep an eye on him, which I didn't know at the time. And so I guess as it kind of took place, the first time I ever really met Bill was at the SEMA show. And I was there with Steve Richards. And Steve said, hey, Bill's over here. I said, you need to meet him. So I said, okay. So we walked over where Bill was, and Bill was being typical Bill, which I didn't know Bill at the time. And so we're walking up behind him, Steve and I, and I see him look over his shoulder, and he sees us coming. And about the time we get up to him, he looks back at me, and he says, I know, don't tell me, another one of those damn off-road racers. Who is this guy? I think he is, And, but obviously I wasn't going to say that.
Right.
But so I met Bill. We shook hands and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And it was a short conversation, and we were on our way. No big deal. The next time I met Bill was when we'd go to Ascot. If we needed something, we'd go by, Simpson's shop. And Fred Crow kind of looked over everything at the time. And so he's who we dealt with at the shop itself. So we stopped in. I stopped in there one evening on the way to Ascot, and I went in to talk to Fred about some stuff. And I'm sitting in the waiting room, and Bill comes out one door, and he's walking across the room. He looks over, hey, and off he went out the other door. Really no conversation. And so that was the second time I'd met him. So the next time I think that I really talked to Bill was a phone call. Or no, I was testing the Super V at Willow Springs. And I think it was after I'd seen him the two times. It all starts to run together these days. But so I was testing the Super V, trying to do the Atlanta, go to the runoff deal, and I'm down at one end of the pit lane, and Bill was up at the other end testing the Formula 5000 car. And I'm working on the car, doing my thing, and all of a sudden I hear somebody say, "Hey, Mears." I looked up, and it was Bill, walking toward me down the pit lane. He says, "Hey, you got to come see this car." And, I hadn't hardly had 3 words with him, and it's just like we've known each other for 10 years. He said, "You got to take a look at this car." And I guess he was getting ready to run in the first 5,000 race at Long Beach. With that car. It was a Berta car, an Argentine car. So the designer was down there with the car. So we went down, and he's showing me the car and, pointing everything out and introduced me to the designer. And we chatted for a while, and then I went back to mine, and he went back to his, and we finished our test, and we're on our way. And I forget how long it was after that. I get a call from Bill one day. Hadn't talked to him since that day in the pit lane, as far as I can recall. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing next Wednesday?" I think it was a Wednesday. I said, "I'm working." I was running construction, equipment operator. I said, "I'm working." I said, "Why? What do you need?" And he says, "I'd like you to test my 5000 car at Willow, if you can get off work." And I said, "I can get off work." Again, never planned any of it. When I was down there looking at it in pit lane, I never even thought, I had just gone to a Super V from a V and hadn't even done but a little bit of that. That was way out of my class. And the IndyCar had never even crossed at that point, even a thought. And so I said, "What do you need?" He said, "I want you to test 5000 car at Willow." I said, "Yeah, I can get off work." And so went over to the test. I think it was a 2-day test, if I remember right, and ran both days. And by the end of the test, I was a little quicker than Bill was. And at the end of the test, he says, "Hey, I want to sign you up." I'd never had a contract with anybody in my life. And he said, "I want to sign you up for, Formula 5000 and or IndyCar." And IndyCar starting to pop up. And so I said, "Great, sounds good to me." So I went on and started running, back to running the V and the Super V, and Bill brought the 5000 car out. We ran a couple of SCCA races, one at Riverside, I remember. I can't remember now if we only ran that one in the 5000 car. I think it was, but I was continuing on trying to go to the runoffs, and in that 5000 race, we were running decent. They ran 5000 Atlantic cars and everything together, I think, and I forget where we started, but it was up toward the front, and just looking forward to getting another race under our belt and something new. And we came around to take the start at Riverside, and as you went through that left-hander to the start-finish line, it was a rise over the tunnel. It had kind of a rise in it. And I'd been over it 100 times in practice, And everybody was on it at that point, heading for the flag for the green. Or it was right after, I don't remember exactly where the flag was. But anyway, we're on the gas going over that rise. And I go over the thing and doing the same thing I'd been doing all weekend, and the thing just goes backwards. And I'm looking at all these cars coming at me head on. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I just kind of, crunched down the seat and held on, and everybody missed me. And I can't remember now if we got going or whatever, but I was destroyed, thinking I'd messed up, made a mistake, and could not figure it. But I didn't feel like I'd done anything different than I'd ever done, and so Bill knew that was eating on me. And so a few days later, whatever, I get a phone call, and it's Bill. He said, "Hey, I found out what happened." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Remember the change we made just before the race? We lowered the connecting, lower lengths, raised or lowered the lengths to the rear end to try to get some push out of the car." And I said, "Yeah." What it done is it moved them up closer to the headers, or dropped it down, I guess it was, closer to the headers coming out from under it. And as we went over the rise, when the car came up and the wheel dropped, the headers got against the link and picked the rear wheels off the ground. And that's what turned it around. So that was a huge relief to me. I mean, that was as good as winning the race. It made me feel a lot better. So now we go on, I'm doing the V and Super V thing, and I don't really hear much more out of Simpson or whatever, and about IndyCar or 5,000 car. Just kind of wondering what's going on there. And next thing I know, he's, getting a hold of me about running the IndyCar at Ontario. And it all was just that quick, and it's while I was still doing the V. I mean, I remember looking at Formula Vs and when I started running Formula Vs, they kind of looked at me like, who's this guy coming out of the desert,
right.
Then I started running the Vs. Well, obviously I started looking at Super Vs, they just looked cool, and they were faster. And, they'd kind of, who's this guy out of the desert? And then all of a sudden I get to Super V, right? And I'm looking at Atlantic cars, and Atlantic guys, who's this kid think he is out of the desert? Then all of a sudden I'm driving a 5,000 car. Now all the Atlantic guys are saying, "Hey, how'd you do that?" But it just all happened so quick, it was just, and I was just having fun. That's all I was doing. It was our family recreation and hobby, starting to become a living, which I had no idea.
So you go from a Formula 5000 to a 2.5 mile oval at Ontario, same layout as Indianapolis Motor Speedway. What's the gee whiz thought process for Rick Mears getting in that car?
My first event at anything was the easiest for me. I mean, because there was no expectations. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have I didn't apply a lot of pressure to myself at that point. It's just I'm out here learning, I'm having fun, and the faster I go, the more fun I can have. It's just, that's why we're here. Not because I like the speed, it's about how can I get through that corner better than they do. That's the fun part, and being competitive. So, my first motorcycle race was, okay, let's go. Green drops and I go run. Okay, now I finish, I've got a position, I've set a mark. Okay, now the next time I go, that starts becoming pressure. I've got to because every time, this whole business, every time you go out on the track, it's how do I do a better job this time than I did the time before I was out there. The same way with each corner. How do I get to it better than I did last time? That's what this is in racing. And so now, okay, if I finish 10th, I've got to finish 9th or better. And that keeps growing. So my first IndyCar race was the same way. And we just went out and ran, and we were fortunate enough, it helped take pressure off because I wasn't in a front-running car. It was a 4-year-old car, a good car. Simpson, they'd freshened it all up and everything to get it ready to sell, and he had purchased a couple of McLarens from Penske, and this was an ex-Donahue Penske car, which is another story. You know, every IndyCar I drove has been owned by Penske. But, you know, the car was in you know, nice shape, you know, but it was a 4-year-old car. And so we qualified, you know, about mid-pack, and to me it was all about, I went in, the desert racing, you know, taught me so much. The motorcycles taught me so much about don't make mistakes because it's going to hurt. And so it taught me how to run without, you know, try to get and find the limit and run a pace that's fast enough to win without making mistakes. Desert racing taught me how to run a pace that's fast enough to win, slow enough to finish, to save the equipment. And you got to get to the end before you can do anything. And I learned that early on. So when I got to Ontario with the IndyCar, my kind of normal thought process, first of all, go out there and learn. You know, every lap I can get, you know, it's all about seat time. The more laps I can make, the more I'm going to know. And so when it came close to race time, we qualified mid-pack. And I thought, okay, what's my best option here? I know I can't outrun them. So my best option is to outlive them for a couple of reasons. You know, the longer I run, the more guys fall out, the more guys I can pass, the better off I'm going to be. But the other main reason was every lap, if I can get a full 500 miles under my belt, I'm just going to be that much further ahead with experience. So it was to me, it was a win-win situation just to run all day. You know, the longer I run, the more guys I'll beat. And that was the strategy going in, which was basically kind of a desert strategy, you know, because back then you could outrun the cars very easy. So you had to learn how, and you can't win if you don't finish. That was just duh, you know. So that's what we went into the race with. And so to me, there was no pressure. Yeah, it was fast and it was different, but luckily, you know, being the 500, we had more track time. You know, we were there for a full week rather than trying to do regular weekend show first time. So that allowed me to kind of get comfortable at my pace, you know, what felt right to me, and without taking too big a risk and taking small steps and trying to find the limit without stepping over it. And it allowed me to get enough seat time to, you know, to get kind of comfortable before the race started. And then, okay, let's get to the end of it, no mistakes. And that was the strategy. And you know, and Bill, you know, his contract, you know, I mean, to me, contract, you know, I'd never had one before. I don't know what it was all about anyway. But he was kind of fulfilling the contract, getting me in the IndyCar. But Bill was no dummy either, you know. He was a little leery of taking this kid out of the desert and sticking him in his expensive IndyCar. So he had decided to sell that car because he had bought the M16s from Penske. And Art Sugai wanted to buy it. So as part of helping me get my foot in the door, he told Bill, he said, I'll sell you the car under one condition, you let Mears drive it at Ontario. And that was part of getting me into the deal there. Plus all the convincing he had to do to USAC to get me in there. But so, and then he said at the end of the day, he said, you know, if you guys are happy, you go down the road together. If you don't, you go your separate ways. And so Sugai agreed to it, and we went out and ran the race, and I finished 7th, I believe it was. And I was tickled to death to finish 7th. I mean, and Sugai, you know, Art was happy. So we went on down the road together, and you know, I ended up running a couple more races, and then tried to qualify for Indy.
Yeah.
But that was how that all took place. And again, that was just the next year after not getting to go to Atlanta to the runoffs, and so that learning, getting the V to get my license, and the Super V, and qualifying to go to Atlanta. And the 5,000 car and the Indy car was all basically 2 years.
Yeah. very
Yeah.
short time frame,
Yeah.
everything
I mean-
whittled down to it. So the next year with Art, I think you ran, there were,
Hang on 1 second. You can ask the question. I just want to make a quick little audio adjustment here, maybe.
no worries, as I hear the rain coming.
Yeah, it was black over there.
was it?
Yeah, that's why I went ahead and came in. Putting 4 drivers out on each
yeah.
corner and do the test. And
Yeah, the observers. at each
Observers.
corner,
I mean, I had to do that here. I can't remember. I had to do something like that there too because
yeah.
I
I'm sure they stuck, some veterans out to.
because I remember Snyder saying something. Because again, George Snyder from Bakersfield.
Yeah, yeah,
There was little context through all of this that
yeah, things happen for a reason.
that now when I look back, I can see what helped make it all happen. But I had no idea at the time because I wasn't planning it.
Like you said, just the seat time of your ascot, or just the constant driving, keeping your name out there.
That and getting the result. But part of helping me get the result was that I wasn't worried about going there.
Right, yeah, you said you had no aspirations even. for
All my
5,000.
focus was in what I was in.
Yeah, right here, right now. I'm gonna
And that
do
helped
best.
create the result. Yeah.
Just because Mario gave you more wine than anybody doesn't mean you always had to be the nicest to him.
Greg, they said.
Don
they
Henderson.
Never gave anything away, right?
I'm sorry.
I
Mario
owe
never
Peggy.
gave anything
I
away.
No,
owe Peggy the
no.
most wine after these last 2 months.
Is the handle, Phil, is that handle out of the way?
I'm leaving, thank you.
Okay,
again.
good to see you.
Okay, I just want to make
All
sure.
right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
One of those we look at in the
Okay.
post and go, oops.
Let's just push it back. It's out, and let's just push it.
Yeah, I don't need it here
No,
close
but
if you
it's better
don't.
than sitting on the ground.
Yeah.
In this day and age.
But it doesn't-
If
it
you're gonna
doesn't-
put something.
No, it just doesn't need being within reach. All I meant.
Ooh, this is a fish off.
Oh.
Oh my God, where are my notes? What am I gonna do? It all started with you, talk about off-road racing, stadium trucks, motorcycles. That's how the Rick Mears, with your brother Roger, racing career started.
Yeah, it was just family recreation. Is all it was. We were just having fun. It was a hobby, and Dad raced in the Midwest when I was very young. And we moved to California, and he quit when I was probably about 5 years old, 5 or 6, and I can barely just remember bits and pieces. Maybe one of the last races or 2 he ran, and he got totally away from it. Got out of the racing, got away from it, but I guess being around something that gets in your blood, the family, especially the whole family, and brother being older, we had to do something with wheels. Anything had to do with wheels. And I mean, when Dad got away from the racing, we went water skiing, we went fishing, we did a lot of that kind of stuff. And but I was always playing with my skateboard, playing with my bicycle, modifying my bike, trying to do different things on it and change gear ratios. This is back before you could change all. You had to make your own sprockets. But so we just grew into it, started riding. Mom and Dad had a couple motorcycles. My brother get on the back with my dad. I'd get on the back with my mom, and we'd go for rides, up in the foothills, mostly on-road stuff. And then when I got a little older, got a little 50cc Tohatsu, I think it was, and Dad would get on his bike and put his foot on the back of the bike and shove me through the roads until we get out of town a little bit, out in the foothills, and I'd take off, and I'd run until I blew it up, and then Dad would push me all the way home, But and that's how it all started. I just always enjoyed something with wheels on it, and school. Went through high school and graduated from high school, but all the time I was in school, I was, okay, how quick can I get home and work on my motorcycle, and so I didn't get too involved in other sports and that kind of thing. I mean, I did a little bit just, playing, but not looking at it seriously. But then the hobby just turned into a living, which I never dreamed of, and I mean, I can look back and see things that we did that helped make it happen, but it was never planned.
So truly, from the very beginning, it was the Mears gang. It
Yes.
was an entire family. Mom and dad, let's get everybody to the beach or off-road or do everything
Yeah.
together.
Well, and where the Mears gang thing came from, besides just being our group and family, was when we started racing the buggies at Ascot, which when I got out of racing motorcycles and Mom and Dad built the buggy, And they made me a deal, said, and it was Mom's idea, if you give up racing motorcycles, I didn't know it was Mom's idea, his dad was telling me. You give up racing motorcycles, we'll build a buggy, because we were playing with some of the Volkswagen stuff in the dunes at the time. So when we built that buggy and started racing at Ascot, the races were so much fun and entertaining, and we'd take somebody from Bakersfield, some friends would go with us.
Yeah.
Well, the next week they had their friends and they'd bring them along, and the next week their friends would have some friends and it just grew and grew and grew. Pretty soon, see, my half Bakersfield was going to Ascot, and that's kind of where the tag came from, Mears Gang. And then my brother, I forget how as far as being said, where it came from, but my brother ended up doing the Mears Gang drawing of the decal and everything, and started making the stickers, the decals for it. But and it just grew from there.
So talk about your success in the buggies in Ascot that led to the next step, if you will. You won a lot of races. You and Roger were having success. How did that move you to the next level?
Well, unknowingly at the time, it was, my name was starting to pop up in that area. Well, Parnelli, was in off-road racing, and we got to know Parnelli, and he became one of our first sponsors. We'd swing by his shop on the way to Ascot from Bakersfield and stop, and they'd mount us up a new set of tires, and we'd go run Ascot that night. And he'd come out to the races from time to time and watch, and and got to know him there. So that was kind of the beginning of it. But as far as the driving went, the second year I won the championship, and for winning the championship, one of the frame manufacturers donated an off-road chassis, single-seat buggy chassis. So, okay, we'll try the desert, because we had the chassis now. So we went home and built that, put it together, and went out and started running, the Mint 400, the Barstow 250, and Baja, and all the desert racing. While we were still doing short track, we'd go, say, Bakersfield to Corona, or we'd go Bakersfield to the desert and do some pre-running, some practice and getting ready on Friday, let's say, after we got off work, and then do a little pre-run on Saturday morning. Then we'd jump in the truck, because we had the short track cars with us, and we'd drive from there back into LA Basin, into Corona, run a short track race, and then Dad would drive all night from there back to the desert, and the next day we'd run the desert race. So we just did that, I don't know how many times. But, then we started getting some success in that, in the desert, and then that just started leading to other things, as far as getting into the Formula V. And there was a guy in town that did he had a little dyno in his garage, and when we'd build a motor for the buggies, we'd take it over to his garage, and he'd dyno it for us to, so we could see where it was at. And he was in SCCA, some Riverside, Cal Club region stuff. And so he came up to me one day and said, "Hey, what do you think about running, getting your pavement license?" I said, "Oh yeah, that'd be great." I'd miss races to go do something new, Pikes Peak, whatever it was. And I just enjoyed getting in something different. And so he said, "Okay," he said, "I've got this old Formula V." He said, "I bought a Super V, which is the next class up." He said, "I'm going to start racing it. We'll take the old V down, and you can, go to the SCCA deal, Cal Club region, and get your license at Riverside." I said, "Okay." So we went down there, and I went through the school and had a lot of fun. It was funny. I'd never really driven on clean, smooth, no dust, no potholes, no rocks and cactus and all that much. And I remember when I was getting in the car and the instructor was going to send us out, he leaned down in the car and he says, "Now listen, son, this is a lot different than that desert racing, that off-road stuff." I'm going, "Yeah, I'm sure it is." So I went out and made the run, and I'm thinking, "Wow, this is nice. It's like Cadillac." I wanted to tell him, "Yeah, you're right. It is different." But I remember it started sprinkling one of the sessions, and I'd never really driven in the wet, and I'm slipping and sliding around. It's like some of the off-road stuff, having a good old time, and I come around the front straight, and guys waving a black flag at me. So I thought, what did I do wrong? I couldn't think of anything that I'd done. So I pull in, and I said, what's the problem? He says, you're going too fast. I thought, wait a minute. I thought that's what this was about.
Right.
But they didn't realize what I was used to. That was kind of nice, smooth. But that led to, I ran a couple races in that, which was an older car. And I don't remember how we finished, but we had decent results, which led to another guy in Formula V with a new car, up to date. Mario Panzarella was his name, and he'd had fallen out with his driver, and he got a hold of me and said, hey, would you like to run my car next year for the season? And I said, yeah, that'd be great, Well, at the same time that was happening, that was coming together, a fellow, and Dr. Sowers, that I ran off-road racing with, he had called me up earlier in that year and says, hey, I want to go to Atlanta to the runoffs and just watch it. He said, I'm going to jump on a plane. You want to go? So I said, sure. And so jumped on a plane, flew to Atlanta to the SCCA runoffs because he knew I was running the Formula V stuff. And so we watched it, everything, and on the way back, flying back, he says, I've got something in mind. He says, I'd like to go to the runoffs, qualify and go to the runoffs. He said, I'll make a deal with you. If I know you're going to be running the V to try to qualify next season. And he says, if I supply the Super V, I'll give you the Super V. You maintain it, get it to all the races, and see if you can qualify it to go to the runoffs at the end of the year. He said, I'll do that for you, get you the car if you co-drive with me in the Baja 500 or one of them,
Yeah.
I thought, boy, that's a win-win. Get a car to race and get to race in another one. So I said, okay. And we got the V, and so that next season I ran all the Cal Club regional races, and the V and the Super V. And we ended up finishing third. You had to finish in the top three in points. And I ran third in the V and won the Super V class. So that qualified us in both cars to run Atlanta at the runoffs. Well, during that same year, I think it was all around the same time, I'm still playing with some off-road stuff in between, and I'm that, and I think Pikes Peak was starting up about then, doing that. And it was just all snowballing real quick. Things were happening fast. Didn't seem fast to me then. It just seemed like, hey, this is what we're doing, And I wasn't planning on it climbing like it did. I was just, somebody said, what do you think about trying with these? Great, I'll do it, and we'd go play. Now, looking back, all those different things I was doing kept my name popping up in different places, which I didn't think about, didn't realize. And getting results, that were halfway decent. So that just kind of kept building. And the next thing I knew, I was getting an offer to drive an IndyCar. I did a test with Simpson when we first got together and all that, but another part of the story. But what ended up happening, kind of jumping to the Atlanta runoffs, I got an IndyCar ride, and the first IndyCar race fell at the same time the Atlanta runoffs happened, and I never got to go to the runoffs. Yeah. And I was really looking forward to that. But I figured I'd put that on the back burner for the IndyCar deal.
Things happen for a reason. Take one step back, because anytime you can work in, talk about the time you raced Parnelli over in Japan in the off-road. Not a lot of people know about that. Yeah,
that was, for me at the time, that was my first major win, they're all major wins to a point, but that one was, against one of my heroes, And that was what happened. A Sandmaster company in the off-road, in the desert part of it, they were kind of like the Penske of IndyCar. Built bulletproof cars. They always won the 1,000, the 500, and all the desert stuff. Well, Don Arnett, he was the owner of Sandmaster, and I guess he was had a falling out with his driver at the time or something. Anyway, he got invited. The Sandmaster team got invited to Japan for this off-road race, and Parnelli got invited, and they were the only two Americans that were invited over for the race. Well, I'd done more short track than I had desert at the time, and Don had heard this was going to be a kind of a short course event. Mm-hmm. So one day I get a phone call, and he says, "Hey, Rick, it's Don." He says, "How'd you like to go to Japan?" I go, "Yeah, that'd be great." First time I'd ever been in an airplane. I'd never been in an airplane in my life, and we jump on a 747 and fly to Japan. But so it was on Oshima Island, which is about 11 miles out of Tokyo Bay, 11, 12 miles. And it was just an off-road race around a volcano, basically, on this island. But what an experience. And, to go over there and we stayed in this little hotel on the island that, everybody ate dinner at the same time, lunch at the same time, and they'd supply everything. And everything was raw, and I grew up on everything burnt, That's the way Dad liked it. And but it was just quite the experience. And then to have the race and have that battle with Parnelli and end up coming out on top on it was, like I said, for me, my first really major win.
Now, had you already were you working for Parnelli? When you worked for Parnelli, was that before or after that race? Didn't you work for Parnelli for a little while?
No, I never worked for him.
Where
No,
did you steal the Johnny Lightning picture off the wall?
Oh, that was Bobby.
Oh, that was from Bobby.
That was Bobby in Gallus.
Okay.
The dealership in Phoenix.
Because you were an exemplary employee, took all your breaks,
yeah.
sometimes did everything perfect, but what's the one thing you had to have a souvenir?
Well, the Lightning car was always one of my favorites. I mean, I never really followed it, but as we started getting closer and you started looking more at history and that kind of thing, and over the years, when it was on TV or whatever, but that was always one of my favorites, the Lightning car. And so when the first year I tried to qualify at Indy and didn't qualify, the company I was working for in Ventura, when I told them I was going to go to Indy, I needed the month off. They said, "Okay, that's great," because he was a racer too, the guy I was working for. And he said, "But I'm selling the business, so you're not going to have a job when you come back." Okay. And the condo my first wife and I and the kids were living in, we told them we were going to be gone for the month. They said, "Well, we're selling the condo, so you're not going to have a place to live when you get back." So we put everything in storage and loaded up a U-Haul and drove to Indy. And then didn't make the show. So now no job, no house, no winnings, no earnings. And so, if that happened at this age, you'd probably want to hang yourself. But back then, 24, 23, whatever I was, it's like, okay, we'll do something else. But Rick Gallus we'd met in off-road racing. He'd purchased one of the off-road cars from my dad, and we'd known Rick for a little while. And plus I'd met Bobby at Pikes Peak and all that. That's how that was all coming together. And again, it was because I was going out and doing different things, which I didn't realize at the time. And so Gallus had heard the predicament I was in. So I ran into him a day or two after the race here that we didn't make. And he said, "I hear you don't have much going." I said, "No." And he was just trying to help me out. He says, "Bobby and I have a Chevrolet dealership in Avondale, near Goodyear in Phoenix, a small Chevy dealership." And he said, if you want to make Phoenix your home base, you can go to work there. And he's thinking in the service department, working on the cars and whatever, and just make that your home base. He knew I was at a crossroads. And I said, "Sounds good to me." So, we went to Phoenix, and I walked through the 70-degree showroom to go out to the open-air 110-degree service department. And I'd grown up, working for Dad on the backhoes out, digging ditch in Bakersfield, and we had the 100 and 110-degree days, a lot. So I'd experienced the heat quite a bit. But I thought, I could take a break from that. So I turned around to Rick and says, "Hey, I think I'll try my hand at sales." He just started laughing, and said, "Hey, I told you, whatever you want to do, that's fine." So I went to work selling cars. And in my sales office was a picture of that car hanging on the wall. And I couldn't resist myself. I knew they wouldn't miss it.
And then one more step back before we get to the Indy stuff, talk about the Pikes Peak experience. It seems like everybody, obviously Unser Mountain, they've won a ton, but Mario's raced there. A lot of the stock car guys used to race there. Parnelli's raced there. Tell us just a little bit about your Pikes Peak experience, if you will.
That was kind of a holiday for us, and the way we treated it. But, second oldest race in the country. And part of the championship for a lot of years or whatever, but not knowing that at the time, we knew of Pikes Peak. Well, what had happened, my brother, one of the guys that was driving for in the short track buggies, said he'd heard about the open wheel rear engine cars, or open wheel class. It was only two classes, stock car and open wheel. And he'd found out that the short track buggy would be legal to run in the open wheel class. So he told my brother, he said, hey, what do you think about going to Pikes Peak and try this buggy up the mountain and see how it does? My brother said, yeah, he was like me. He wanted to run everything, He said, sure. So they went, and he ran well. I don't remember, they had problems or something. I don't remember exactly how he finished, but he ran well. The car was quick in qualifying and all that. And so I didn't go to that race. And so when he came back to town, they were all fired up because the cars worked so well there. So they seriously started like, okay, how can we change this car to make it better for up there? What can we do? And they started getting serious about it. So then, some friends of ours in the short track said, hey, what do you think about going there? And I said, oh, yeah, I'll do it. So the next year we went back and ran. And to me, I loved it. And that's when it was all dirt, no pavement anywhere. But it was one of those roads you dreamed about as a kid. It's smooth and it's wide and it's dirt and you're sideways everywhere you go and backing it into the corner and all that. And it was just a ball to run. And the buggies, they really did. We were running against the sprint cars, which were front engine. And, they had a lot more power than we did, but they couldn't get it to the ground like the rear engine buggy did. The buggy only had 90 to 100 horse at the time, and you get up in altitude, it probably had about 60. But it got it all to the ground. And it was funny. The first year we went back, running the Weber carburetors and everything, and we had no idea. We didn't have Dial-A-Jet or anything at that time yet. And so we were trying to figure out what kind of mixture to set the thing at for the hill, for the altitude change. And so one of the guys said, hey, why don't we just take a dyno, throw it in the back of the pickup, and run up halfway up the mountain and plug everything in up there and dyno the thing halfway. That makes sense to me, Then you got what you got at the bottom, you got what you got at the top, but at least it's going to be the middle of the road. So we did that, dynoed the thing and ran, and it worked great. I think I qualified third the first year. I think it was my memory these days. I think we qualified third, and the pole sitter fast qualifier went off first. So you're not really supposed to catch anybody. Everybody that started ahead of you is supposedly faster. Well, I think we'd stumbled and had a little problem in qualifying, which caused us to not qualify as quick as we should have. Then the race started, and the car it was running well, and I started reeling the two guys in front of me in. And I'm thinking, oh man, here we go. I was used to the dust a little bit in the desert, but you didn't have a cliff you were running next to. Mm-hmm. So I start catching the second place car, and I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting. And just about the time I started getting to where it was getting pretty critical in the dust, I lost a cylinder in the engine, and it kept running, but I lost power. So then it was just that kind of kept me at bay of the guy running second, and I just went ahead and followed him the rest of the way up the mountain. I think we ended up running third, but it was a great race. And then to go back, and I ran it 3 years. I forget exactly what we did in the second year in the middle, but each year you learn the mountain more, and like when I said we made it a holiday, there was a little hotel down at the foot of the mountain that we'd kind of take over.
Yep.
And the guy that owned the hotel, he loved it, and all the racers being there, you know. And, I mean, we had gearboxes in the sink in the room, changing gears, and, you know, we cleaned everything up afterwards, obviously. Took care of the guy, you know, but he loved seeing all that going on. And so we'd go up and you know, you had to be on the